Welcome to the Fantasy Fangirls podcast, where two sisters dive deep into beloved fantasy lore, character themes, theories, and more.
I'm Lexi, older sister and fantasy lore nerd.
And I'm Nicole, younger sister and romantic at heart.
And today is episode 7 for Heat of the Everflame by Penn Cole, where we are covering chapters 65 through 70. It is our second to last episode of deep diving the series, at least for now. And who is ready for a battle episode? I know I am. Before we begin this Heat episode 7, please, as always, listen closely to our spoiler warning, because all of our episodes have spoilers for all of Book 3 of the KINDRED'S Curse Saga, Heat of the Everflame. Yes, that includes the ending. We're almost at the ending, everybody.
Not only do we get the big Sophia Kai download of all downloads, but we also just spent the weekend with Penn Cole. We have insights to share. So if you have not finished the book, then please go read the rest of the series. I mean, it's literally 6 chapters. You can do it. We will be here when you're done.
Next, we have Fantasy Fangirls, are adults who say adult things about adult books. In other words, friends, this podcast is rated R.
We end this stretch of chapters seconds before the shower scene. But that does not mean we will not find some way to make this battle episode inappropriate. So please be mindful of those little listening ears.
Additionally, we are so excited to see you at upcoming live events. We will be at Romantasy BookCon in Orlando, Florida, October 23rd through 25th, where we are interviewing Rebecca Yarros again at Disney World.
Then on March 6th through 8th in Dallas, Texas, we will be podcast partners at Dreamers and Readers Festival.
We also have a few more exciting events coming up through the end of this year. We're not quite ready to share them yet, but please stay tuned for more information.
Check out our website or the links below in the show notes for more information to all of these events, especially a discount code to Dreamers and Readers Festival in Dallas, Texas.
Last thing before we jump into this Heat of the Everflame episode 7, if you love Fantasy Fangirls and want more events, more content, more community, and so much more all around, please check out Fantasy Fan Club.
We have 3 membership tiers that you can join. Number 1, The Descended, which includes access to our Boppin' Discord, live Q&As from Lexi and myself, a book club, exclusive author interviews, community events like trivias, promo codes for live events, plus exclusive designs and 20% off all merch. Yes, that includes our 2-year anniversary special edition merch. All of that is for $6 a month, or you can join the Royal Family, which includes everything from the Descended level, plus early access to ad-free episodes, our full episode outlines, and special voting privileges. That is for $10 a month. And last but not least, we have our Crowns Council, which includes everything from the previous 2 tiers, plus more behind-the-scenes content, a welcome gift, giveaways, a private Discord channel, and your name shouted out on the podcast. That is for $25 a month.
Join the party at fantasyfangirls.com/fan club. The link is also in the show notes. And thank you so much for supporting us as this incredible community and career has grown into what it is these past 2 years. We appreciate you so much. Thank you for being here.
And now it is time to defend Sophos.
To start off every episode, Nicole does us the honor of summarizing this stretch of chapters. So gather round as we consult with our royal advisors to discuss what happens in chapters 65 through 70 of Heat of the Everflame.
Chapter 65. Diem's first impression of Sophos leaves much to be desired. And by that, I mean she spends 2 days writhing on the ground in agony while her Sophos magic manifests. When she's finally lucid enough to move, they're on the road again into the beautiful, mind-bending, futuristic city of Sophos. Waltzing into the city like they own the place, Diem and Luther do absolutely nothing to hide their presence. Barging her way into an old mortal temple, Diem all but screams for the Sophos crowd to come and find her. And they do. Dorio waltzes in with their powerful aura and epic politicking. Diem, you better hope they agree to complete your coronation. But first, a little sightseeing in the city with our tour guide, Stuart. What's this? Perth! But that can only mean one thing. Hello, Teller. Chapter 66. Well, this is awkward, but hold up. There's Diem, Luther, Stuart. Where the fuck is Orly? Well, youngest Bellator, that's an excellent question. One that Diem cannot answer. After finding a more private location to catch up, the two siblings realize that maybe the miscommunication trope isn't only for the love interest in the story, and maybe, just maybe, they need to be a little bit more honest with each other. I'm looking at you, Diem. You and your jumping to conclusionness. The two decide that it's time to lay the truths out on the table. But wait, Diem, why is your neck glowing? Oh shit. Ophi is coming. Chapter 67. Alarm! 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 Quick, someone get Doriel. Hide those who can't fight and round up those who can. And someone get the weapons, please. Outside the library, Diem meets up with Luther and Doriel, and together they form a plan. Step 1, release Luther's magic by using Diem's Umbros magic, of course. Step 2, Doriel and Vexus lure Ophi out of the city. And step 3, everyone who can fight, go, fight, win! Throwing out all of her magic, Diem does her best to push the mortal rebels back without gravely injuring them. Stuart arrives just in time with a few Godstone weapons from the archive. Diem only has a few moments before Dragon Fire! And thank the gods she has her Godstone sword and ice magic to protect everyone around her, and herself too, without shielding. We'll be talking about that later. But Diem has no time to contemplate that new level of strange magic before she gets pinned to the ground by Ophiakai's Gryvern. Chapter 68. Dangling in the Gryvern's claws, Diem is completely at Ophiakai's mercy, and he gives it to her for the sole reason that she set him free. Father of the Year award right there, question mark? Oh, and he doesn't stop there. He wants to rule the world with Diem. Together they will be unstoppable. Where have I heard this? Oh yeah, every evil villain monologue ever. Crashing in out of nowhere, Doriel and Vexus distract Ophi and take off into the sky, and Diem uses her Umbros magic to convince all of the mortal rebels to get the fuck out of the city. But wait, where's Luther? Throwing out her magic, Diem is desperate to find her mate. I mean, boyfriend, lover, partner, I still don't know what to call these two. Feeling his aura though, Diem turns to not only find Luther, but a hostage Vance as well. And what does she do? She lets him go. Chapter 69. Nice. We've been waiting a long time to say those words. As thanks for saving their city, Doriel has decided that they will send word to the other crowns in favor for Diem completing her coronation. Huzzah! There's only one problem though. Diem has 2 days to convince her mother to convince the Guardians to let the crowns onto the island. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. It actually is. But let's not dwell on that. Who wants a history lesson? After giving Diem the TLDR on the 10th kindred, aka Omnos, the trio makes a quick stop at the hospital. But what's this? Godstone wounds? If only there was a cure. Oh wait, there is. Sneakily dripping some of her own blood into the healer's poultice, Diem and Luther, not so sneakily, rush out for some alone time. Chapter 70. Just kidding. Luther and Diem get a rundown of Sophos' life from Teller, and Diem has to admit it's pretty damn nice here. But when they do finally get a moment alone, Luther again practically recites mating vows to Diem, but this time they are very close to the actual thing. But Diem pulls back. Why? Because Luther wasn't there when she actually needed him. So, opening himself up to her magic, Diem watches what actually went down on Luther's end of the battle. As he watches her, he gets hard watching her, and then he takes his sexual frustrations out on Vance by chasing him down and getting his garish piece of tin, aka the sword of Corbois, back. Outside of his memory, Luther drags Diem to a mirror, needing her to see herself the way that he sees her, the badass woman who confronts kings and queens, who bargained with gods, and the woman Luther loves. And I am officially a puddle. It's perfect timing for a shower scene, right? Oh, wait, that's next episode.
All right, so we're going to splash some cold water on Nicole real fast. And it is time to reach for our forging magic and unravel key insights, character analysis, lore, foreshadowing, theories. I have so many theories this episode and so much more. You all, it is finally time to go to Sophos. Quick reminder that Sophos is the realm to the east of Montios, which of course includes the Forgotten Lands. Let's quickly set the scene from where we left off last episode. It was agreed for Orly to leave Diem and Luther and meet up with nearby Guardians, with the goal to send warnings to all of the Guardian cells about Ophiakai and what he's doing and planning. So she's now focused on preventing more Guardians from joining Ophiakai and Vance. While Orly is off doing that, Diem and Luther set off to Sophos for two main reasons. Number one, Diem needs to get properly coordinated, so she needs to talk to the Sophos Sophos' crown, Doriel, who leads the coronation ceremony. Diem has to convince Doriel to get the other crowns to agree to finish the ritual. Remember how these descended crowns need the coronation to reinforce the forging spell, which right now the forging magic across the realms is fraying because it has not been done recently. And Diem does have her own motivation to get properly coronated, so Lumnos, and specifically Remus, will honor her status as queen. Reason number 2 for going to Sophos. Diem needs to unlock the last of her magic. Sophos is the only realm she has not set foot into yet by this point in her life, which means she has all the Kindred's magic except Sophos' spark magic and super photographic memory. So let's go get the Sophos magic. But to say Diem's first steps into Sophos are brutal, that would be an understatement. Initially, Diem is trapped by her spark magic and endless bolts of lightning that leave her body convulsing, her hair standing on end and the grass around her burnt. It's not until poor Diem passes out from sheer exhaustion that she finally gets a break from this electrical magic activating within her. On her second day in Sophos, the thought magic kicks in, which leaves Diem at the will of all her memories, now in perfect clarity. This magic enhances any memory Diem can already recall, unlocking details she never realized she even knew. Note that if Diem has already forgotten the memory, it's lost forever. The downside to all this intense memory recalling as she gets her magic is that unfortunately most of these memories are bad ones. Who else can relate that it feels like the negative memories stand out more than the positive? Yes, I think we're both raising our hands here. By day 3, Diem has enough control over herself after getting these 2 new types of magic to continue on to Sophos City. The reason her magic came in so intensely for Sophos and not for any of the others is because when she thought she was immortal and unlocked her other realm magic like Arbros, Fortos, Faunos, and Montios, she was drugged with Flame Root. Same with when she went to Igneos. The Flame Root effects were slowly wearing off over several days. And then she was close to dying when she went into Umbros, and a little distracted where she couldn't recognize the mind-reading magic for what it was. So getting her Sophos magic here, after 20 years of the magic laying dormant until she touched the realm's soil, is a lot for one person to handle. Add that she's extra powerful, no wonder it takes her till day 3 to get to Sophos City, which, oh my gosh, I just love so much how Sophos City is futuristic and has such a big city vibes.
I think I put this in favorite moments, but it gives me such New York City vibes where everyone's like on a rush to get somewhere and Luther and Diem are just like casual and they're like, "Gah, move faster." I'm like, yep, that sounds about right. First stop for Luther and Diem, a row of mammoth structures on a hill, each with grand and marble entryways and intricate wooden panels. They are ancient compared to the other buildings in this shiny city. These are old, emphasis on extremely old, mortal institutions, buildings that were once used as libraries or even universities long ago. I'm assuming this is like before Kindred long ago. And in between these buildings, though, there is a fallen temple with, quote, bits of words and etchings were visible on the larger stones. I could feel my newly enhanced brain cataloging every word and symbol, permanently recording them into my memory. I guarantee you, we are going to see this again. That when we meet someone who knows how to decipher this type of text, because, yep, you guessed it. Well, we talked to Penn about the kindred magic that's on the sword, but I guarantee you, this is also going to come back into play sometime in Burn.
So see, I wonder if it's already in the common language, since the kindred did adopt the mortals language. And then what Diem learns from the Sophos library books or the Umbros books, she can figure out the symbols?
Maybe. I was wondering that too, like if there's like a decoder or something like that. No matter what, I don't think that we're done with this, but what could it mean? Like it could give her some kind of insight on the Everflame or...
I agree that I bet what is written on these runes are directly tied to the Everflame. And when Diem takes a few moments to reflect on it, like, you know, when she's got all the time in the world on the island, she's like, at least she has so much reading material from her mind, right? She'll be able to piece together the words or perhaps learn about who this red-haired man is. Or maybe the words on this rune and the symbols and whatnot, it's a riddle or a prophecy that somehow connects to all these kindred prophecies that we've heard. Instead of keeping a low profile here in Sophos, Diem has nothing to hide. She is here to confront the Sophos crown after all, and present herself as someone who is powerful and, quite frankly, a threat. threat, which she strategizes will help her have leverage to get what she needs from the Sophos crown. And yes, the Sophos crown will most definitely see Diem as a threat, even after they become allies, as we will unfortunately see next episode. So why not get the crown's attention by entering these off-limit runes, walking right through the electrical barrier and absorbing its magic, while ignoring the guards yelling at her to stay away? But showing off that she can enter this restricted building with ease is not the only reason Diem is so drawn to these mortal runes. This is her people's history, and so much of it has been lost over the centuries. She wants to learn about the ancient mortals, and here is a piece of history she never knew still existed. That is so incredible to think about. Like, putting myself in her shoes, I would be so drawn to these runes as well. As Diem and Luther climb into the ruins of this old mortal temple, she spots something very interesting and familiar now to all of us in the story. A fresco, which is like a wall painting, of a man leaning against the Everflame tree. And while the details of this painting have faded with time, it is obvious that this man has vibrant red hair, which leads to this exchange. Diem notes that this tree must be the Everflame because she saw a similar image in the Umbros library, and she wonders who this man is who is always represented here with the Everflame tree. Immediately following her question about who he is, Luther replies, quote, "With that hair, he must be related to your mother." We have talked about this endlessly on the podcast, but here it is on the page. Literary proof, as far as I'm concerned, that Orly, and therefore Diem, is somehow a direct descendant of whoever this man is and how he is connected to the Everflame. I think we're both in agreement he is like the Everflame keeper. He's the original, literal guardian of the Everflame that later inspires the rebel group's name. So of course, we had to ask Penn 2 questions about all of this during our recent Q&A at the Everflame Ball. Number 1, will we learn more about this red-haired man and his connection to the Everflame? To which Penn gave a resounding yes. There is a lot more to learn about the old mortal religion and the Everflame in Burn, and he is of course part of that. And the second question we had was whether this line Luther says about being related to Orly will come back into play. And Penn just laughed and said, light and airily, and I'm going to add sarcastically dismissive, "This was a throwaway comment, no importance at all." So, in other words, what I heard is, yes, that is very important, and stay tuned for Burn.
Yep, exactly. So we learned that one of the reasons the Everflame depiction wasn't banned before the Blood War was because the mortal leaders gave the island of Kareel, with the Everflame on it, to the Kindred as a gift. And the Everflame was supposed to be a symbol of their submission, basically, to the Descended rule. So we can assume that is one of the reasons that they, meaning the Kindred, stopped the wars of the mortals when they arrived to Amarian. But there's a word that really stood out to me here, because the mortals gave Kareel to the Kindred as a gift. Gift! So, what if they're, I don't know, I feel like I'm grasping at straws, but I felt like I got like a whole body chills, because give him our gift, daughter of the forgotten, could mean the island of Kareel. But then there's the second part of this that makes everything come crumbling down, and that is, give our gift to my faithful heir. Why would she give Kareel to Luther unless Luther isn't the faithful heir and it's someone else differently? Maybe it's this red-haired man.
If I've learned one thing from this past weekend with Penn, is that everything regarding these, I'll call them prophecies, have double meanings.
Yes.
And she was very clear that it does not always, or often, or maybe ever, mean what it actually means.
One of my favorite things was it was like 1:30 in the morning. We were folding book covers for the special editions, and we were grilling Penn, with consent, of questions about Burn and everything. And she kept saying this over and over again. And just as the night grew longer, I just started spiraling more.
Our friend said that we had our theory podcast voices on.
Yes.
Okay, so let's run with this for just 2 seconds, that Kareel is the gift. That would certainly fall under the category of, we've seen it, but it's hard to identify, like Penn said during our Q&A. But in that case, like you're saying, who would the gift be given to? I feel like Kareel should be gifted to all the people.
I agree. So faithful heir is singular. And
Yes.
I don't think that is a multiple meanings, meaning it would be multiple people in the way of one Amarian. I don't know. I don't know. I wanted to point that out, wave my hands in the air and say, maybe? Why would the man's vibrant hair be still so vibrant? Because that also felt important, maybe not to plot or lore, but more so for like a literary symbolism. Almost like the color of this man's hair itself is just as eternal as the undying fire. Anyway, all of this to say before I just lose my mind. Sadly, the temple that was used for the old mortal religions has been torn down for heresy, as Luther learned in school, which sends Diem's righteous brain on a rampage of how injustice and the treatment of mortals by the Descended. However, we do come to learn that that is not the whole story from Doriel, and this is going to be a theme this episode for Diem, where she does think in very black and white. Long, long, long ago, the continent was filled with magnificent buildings just like these on the hill, but it was not the Descended or the Kindred who tore them down and ruined those magnificent buildings as punishment for the mortals for practicing their old religion. No. The mortals were some of the ones who tore them down. Note, this is a very important lesson for Diem to learn. She is quick to damn the Descended against the mortals because that's the narrative she has seen, experienced her whole life growing up. But as she's learning, and I have a gut feeling it's going to be very prominent in Burn as well, there are two sides to every story, and the mortals are not always the victims in every scenario, although I am not discounting their oppression. Please hear me on that.
Yes, I agree with you, and I think that so much of this theme is how you learn history and the lens that you learn history from.
Especially when history is erased.
Exactly.
Because then it's up to the person who, like you're saying, is saying it.
Yes, exactly. And I don't think that there is ever a right and wrong. Penn is really showing that the mortals, they had their own issues before the Kindred arrived. And yes, the Kindred did help, but there was a high cost at that too. And it's exploring all of this. And so Doriel, when they will be kind of pushing back with Diem, they will be like, I have the records. I can show you all of this. And I'll also challenge that just because there are records that say the mortals were willing to do this, that doesn't just automatically make it all okay. There's always context and all of that kind of stuff. So I do agree that we are going to explore those nuances of history and all of that. And it's not looking for who is right and who is wrong. It is showing that this happened, you know? And bringing it to light so that people can at least have the opportunity to have all of the information to then make their own judgments.
And I think one of the things that Diem is slowly learning here, and I do think is going to really learn and Burn, is that the right versus wrong is not always mortals are right, Descended are wrong, because I think that's exactly the conclusion that she was so quick to jump to here. But she is learning that it is much more nuanced in these history lessons. I think she's learning that in the present pretty well. I think she learned that.
She learned that in Spark. That was the big thing with Spark, where it's like, oh, the Guardians are not always good or bad. And then in Glow, it was, oh, the Descended are not always good and bad. And then in Heat, this is really where she's learning history is not always right or wrong. And I think that's all going to come to a culmination in Burn. Going back to the agreement that the mortals, take up the Kindred as their gods, and in return, they get protection. I think we are in agreement that it's not like the Kindred were all, we must be your gods and you must accept. It was definitely more of a subtle agreement that this is simply what the Kindred are, what they are capable of with their magic and all. And then the early Descended are the ones who took advantage of their superiority over the mortals.
Well, so remember back in the Umbros Library, we discussed at length these old mortal wars on the continent when and before the Kindred arrive. These were the wars that Montios had mentioned in her diary that reminded her of the wars that the Kindred left on their homeland. It turns out countless treasures, art, map, books, buildings, they were all destroyed. The mortal ruler of the lands during that time instead offered these buildings up to the Kindred Sophos, like the Kindred Sophos, in the hopes that he would protect them, meaning the buildings on the hill.
Yes, and I believe this was part of the agreement that the mortals take up the Kindred as their gods, and in return they get protection. Not like the Kindred were all, we must be your gods and you must accept. Definitely more of a subtle agreement that this is simply what they are, what they can do with their magic, and all of that. I keep thinking back to Montios' diary, when it's like the mortals think of us as gods because we were able to do all these things, and my siblings kind of like it, but it's also really weird. And then the early Descended, they are the ones who truly took advantage of their superiority superiority over the mortals.
Well, on that same note, the temple that Diem and Luther are in right now, it did end up being destroyed by the fourth Sophos crown, so several generations before Doriel. Why? We don't know, which is interesting to me because it does say earlier that the mortals were in charge of tearing down some of their buildings, but not these ones right here. This one right here was done by the fourth Sophos crown. Now, could it be because of the heresy that Luther spoke of, because they practiced the mortal religions and the Sophos crown was like, no, you will not do that anymore? Again, going back to that, taking advantage of the superiority.
Yeah, by the fourth generation for a Sophos crown, that could be hundreds, if not thousands of years after the kindred. And I bet during this time there was becoming mortal unrest, which made the Sophos crown crack down, like destroying this temple here. The Sophos crown acted out of fear and control over the mortals instead of preserving history.
But we will find out from Doriel that they're not a fan of this act that the fourth Sophos crown did. They don't want knowledge or history to be erased. Over these next 2 episodes, we're going to be dissecting a lot of Doriel's character, about the choices they make and why they make them, because I'm firmly in the camp that everything they do from their POV makes total sense. So it is important for us to hear this as a driving factor for them as a leader during wartime. They don't want history erased. They want to learn from it, which is ironic considering what they do next episode. The second the Sophos crown, Doriel, enters the temple with both Diem and Luther, they finally meet this crown face to face. Doriel's aura is powerful, enough to make both Diem and Luther pause.
Which I love this aura power meters that we have with the different crowns. I would compare Sophos most to the Umbros crown level of power, maybe a little less than Umbros, whereas the Fortos and Igneos kings are far less powerful.
Definitely. But it's not just their power that leaves people staring. Doriel has this otherworldly beauty to them. They have these high cheekbones. They're wearing a veil held in place with a gold circlet over their shaved head. Notably, they do not wear their Sophos crown. Diem notes they're rigid. They clearly love order, but they also are delicate and effortless. One thing is for certain, though. They are not thrilled to see Diem and Luther waltzing into their realm uninvited.
But like from her uninvited presence in Fortos, Diem has an answer to why she's allowed to be here. Sophos issued an edict calling for Diem's capture. She's here now, ready to offer a trade and discuss an alternative to capture with Doriel, her crown for her sword. Diem gets to properly get coronated so she can get her crown, and in return, she will save the rest of Amarian from Ophi, since she is the only one who has a chance going up against him. As Diem explains to Doriel, from telling most of her story, yes, leaving out some important details like getting other crowns and having other realm magic, and to showing Doriel how she can absorb magic. Diem has one more way of securing Doriel's trust to make this trade happen. Diem offers a bonded bargain. Oh boy. Doriel votes in her and her mother's favor, does everything they can to secure Miros' vote too, which secretly gives Diem all 6 votes she needs to be pardoned and coronated, and her mother not executed for being the rebel leader. And in exchange, Diem will kill her sire, who is leading these attacks. Friends, you know how Diem can be a little impulsive sometimes? This is one of those times. The second she offers a bonded bargain, the words have barely come out of her mouth, she regrets it, realizing that she just put out a big risk where she can lose her magic. And only pages ago, she admitted to herself that she did not think she would be able to stop Luther from killing her sire, let alone her having to do it herself. Doriel says they'll consider her bonded bargain offer, and that, quote, there are matters I need to look into first. Some research I require. I think this is Doriel wanting to look more into any records of Diem's kind of magic. And I think this is the beginning of Doriel working behind the scenes to betray Diem. They see this as an opportunity to get rid of one powerful threat to the crowns. So Doriel right here just got her to offer up a bonded bargain where she can lose her magic, and Doriel is like, okay, I'm gonna go see what I can do with that.
Well, they're like, well, if we can ensure she either takes the most powerful threat off the map, aka Ophi, or loses her magic, that is a win-win situation from them. We'll be getting into all of their POV and what they're thinking behind the scenes in a moment. As you can imagine, Doriel is hesitant to agree to this bargain. They need to do more research. For one, They are unsure if Diem is even the crown of Lumnos to begin with. We're not even touching the other crowns because they don't technically know that yet. Doriel is a person of fact. The fact that Diem's blood on the ritual dagger should have turned the gems blue, but they went gray. Then, her blood broke the Heartstone. That's not supposed to happen. They want clear facts that equal a clear outcome, and none of that is happening right now. Secondly, as Diem tells them about her sire and the 10-pointed star, I love this. Doriel begins flitting through their own archives of their mind of information about what that could mean. God, that would be so helpful. Oh my goodness. I think I'm changing my answer from Miros. I definitely would want the power of Sophos, hands down. We can imagine that whatever they learned about the Omnos and the 10th kindred, it is not painting Omnos Ophiuchi, Diem's sire, in the best of light, and especially given that they lie to Diem and say that they have no idea what she's talking about, which Diem knows because of using her Umbros magic. So thinking that she's connected to Ophiuchi, who was locked up during the Blood War, this would ring so many red flags for Doriel. Thirdly, there's the orally of it all. Diem broke her mother out of prison. The leader of the Guardians who bombed the sacred temple on the island of Kareel. That is not good. She is also in charge with the Guardians. Then Diem also broke out the Guardians in Fortos. It's not a good look. If Diem was trying to get all the crowns back to the temple on the island, an island that currently has Guardians on it, how does Doriel know that she's not just helping her mother to achieve round 2? When they bring this up, Diem snaps at them for their responsibility about mortals dying every day on Amarian soil. It sounds a lot like something a Guardian would say. From Doriel's POV, they would be wild if they took Diem up on this pardon, given who she's connected to alone.
With Doriel saying they need 2 days to research, aka put a plan together against Diem, Diem and Luther are able to get a tour of wherever they'd like to go here in Sophos City. Diem can even have crown level access, even though she's not officially a crown yet because, she's not coronated. Thank you for rubbing that in, Sophos. Which brings us to a new character's introduction, Stuart! A teenage mortal originally from Miros, whose mother is a researcher in the greenhouses here. And here is where we get a little insight into mortal life in Sophos from someone whose family is living it. And guess what? They're happy here. His mother's invitation to research was for 10 years, and it's been almost 9 years. So they hope for a permanent offer to stay, which makes Diem terrified that this poor kid's mom is going to get murdered. But more on that in a moment. We learn that everyone who used to know this mortal family back in Miros, they think they're dead. Wait, what? Teller will soon enough fill in the details because this is very important information that Diem and specifically Henry did not know. Mortals who come to Sophos fake their deaths so only their loved ones know they are safe. This is because they get paid so well in Sophos and they send money back to their families in their home realms, which made their families a target for thieves. So now it is standard practice to pretend to die so loved ones of people who go to Sophos are not targets. Well, that sure does make sense. So what about the mortals who become experiments when they can't do the research anymore? Well, Teller will inform us that they volunteer because they want to do something useful with their lives. It's considered noble here in Sophos, and the research findings from these volunteers can help save thousands of lives. The volunteers get paid a fortune that they can leave behind for their families, so their families are set up for a good life for generations to follow. Diem's not wrong that this all might work within the system, but it's still feeding into this oppression against the mortals as a whole. They shouldn't have to volunteer for something like this so that they can get paid for their families. The mortals should already have the opportunity to have wealth. And this is where Teller essentially pushes back that maybe this is true, but two things can coexist. The overarching oppression against the mortals in this world is bad and the entire system is extremely flawed and not okay. And the mortals do well for themselves and their families here in Sophos, and that is a good thing. Teller will say at least there is a good option for mortals here. At least they have a chance for their families. Why can't that be a positive for mortals as they simultaneously push against the oppression throughout Amarian? Sophos is very different from Lumnos for, well, a lot of reasons. For instance, earlier Doriel said that any mortal can request a visit to the old mortal ruins. They just need a documented history of study and interest, trustworthy references, and no criminal activity. But that's when Diem brought up a good point. Having any history of study and interest is a criminal activity in Lumnos, and we can gather other realms too. So while Sophos' rules in its own realm make sense for it, these rules are not applicable in the slightest elsewhere. Mortals are only allowed in Sophos by invitation because they are recognized as very bright and intelligent. But it's incredibly hard for a mortal to have the opportunity to even have such qualities because their education system is so oppressed. So again, it goes back to this, once when a mortal is able to make that jump and go into Sophos, that is a huge accomplishment for them. Yes, it is messed up that it even has to be a huge accomplishment, and it is still an accomplishment that they can celebrate.
And I also love that moment. It's Doriel bringing up, well, that sounds like a problem for the crown of Lumnos to fix. And Diem's like, I'm trying, coronate me, and I will. It's like everything is this never-ending cycle of chicken or the egg.
Yep.
And it's just, it's real. That's what I really like about this. It's like you were saying earlier, there is no good and bad. But now is a great time to remind everyone that Diem is a flawed FMC. She believed everything she has heard about Sophos from Henry. I am not flaws her for that. That was her best friend. She trusted him. She also grew up her entire life living the narrative of mortals are oppressed, descended are bad. I do not blame her for that. And also, to be fair, the lie to protect Sophos' mortal residents, it is extremely convincing. People believe they're dead back home because that's what they want them to believe. So I also don't blame Henry and the Guardians for believing that Sophos murders all of its mortal residents either. Stuart and his family purposefully faked their own deaths back in Miros so they wouldn't be a target. But pause, wait, I don't think that's going to happen with Teller though, right? Like Lily won't be believing he's dead.
No, I think that this is very, very different situation. Teller is unique, which is why he's allowed to be here in the first place, because otherwise he wouldn't be. So no, I don't think any of that applies.
Okay, that's what I figured too. Anyway, back to the matter at hand. Diem has been led to believe this lie, and she does not hold back when she talks to Doriel about it, to the point that they're literally like, what are you talking about? I have no idea. And when they attempt to explain it and talk about it, Diem cuts them off with a quote, defend your murders to someone else. I keep going back to that line that Andre said, where it's like, does your anger make actually a difference, or does it just make you feel self-righteous? Diem is righteous, but steadfast. She is most of the time compassionate as well. We'll be talking about that later with fans. Unless she has made her mind up about something. And here she has decided it is black and white, Sophos equals bad. And we also see this in her interaction with Stuart, trying to convince him to go home, to leave Sophos, that he shouldn't become an experiment, even though Stuart is telling her very plainly, I am happy here. I'm going to give Diem a lowercase L, a tiny 9-point font Arial lowercase L. For how she does come into Sophos with this righteous indignation fury, refusing to see the gray. And it isn't until her little brother calls her out on it that she's like, oh, you're right. Because she does pride herself on being able to see the gray,
yes,
to the point that she has a little bit of an ego about it. And here she is completely disregarding it and thinking she's the savior of everyone.
I absolutely agree with you on that, but I might not even give her a 9-point L here.
Okay.
And I'll say this, I don't think that she deserves an L for her judgment when coming here, and for her initial disbelief when speaking to Sophos. Remember back in Igneos, and her closest descended friends were trying to deny what ended up being the truth about how Igneos killed the fleeing mortals from the realm. Diem is kind of treating this situation the same with Doriel. Yes, she is refusing to leave this black and white thinking until Teller lays it all out for her, but she doesn't trust the descendants' POV of the mortals because it has proven to be very warped and inaccurate.
That is very fair. Again, I don't blame her for believing that this is the case. What I do give her the super tiny lowercase L for is more the belief that she's the savior of everyone, and sometimes
that she knows better than Stuart.
That she
and
knows
all
better
of them.
than
Yeah.
Stuart. Exactly. That's where I'm getting my lowercase from.
Okay, I will accept that. Sorry, Diem, I tried. As Diem gets a tour of the greenhouses, she runs into someone very unexpected. Perth, my boy! But what the hell is Perth, my boy, doing here? He is Teller's bodyguard, who never leaves his side. Huh.
I'm not ready to say goodbye to Perth.
Don't you dare say those words, Santa.
We're forgetting about that. That's not real. But it's not just Perth. Hello, Teller. Teller, our young academic, has decided to accept the offer to study in Sophos. Remember, this is the offer from the Sophos representatives that they gave Diem at her Ascension Ball back in Glow, and Diem turned it down aggressively because she believed it was a ploy to get Teller to Sophos and kill him as an experiment. Again, something we do not blame her for. This is why she did not tell her little brother about the invitation as well. So, how are you here, Teller? It turns out that Remus told Teller about this offer. And while yes, Remus has his own motives that I can't wait to get into in a second, Teller did make this decision to come here on his own, even if it meant leaving Lily. So let's go through his main reasons of accepting this position. Number 1, life for Teller in Lumnos is extraordinarily difficult now. Since Diem, Luther, and Arlie's attempt to return back to Lumnos, Teller is a prisoner in the palace. He can't go to school because the Descendants see him as the traitor queen's brother and rebel leader's son. He can't see his mortal friends anymore. And then there's also the Fortos soldiers who had no problem attempting to kill his sister, so there's this ever-present fear of, would they try to kill him too? He's terrified to exist in that realm, and going somewhere else was mighty tempting, somewhere he did not have to hide because no one knew who he was. Number 2, this place is a dream for Teller. He has always wanted to study in Sophos, and as an academic, this is the pinnacle of one's education. That cannot be discounted. Number 3, there's Lily, a Descendant who he is in love with, but she is still a Descendant. She will live for hundreds, if not thousands of years, and he will die as a mortal in a fraction of that time. If he leaves her, she can still find a partner to spend the rest of her very long life with, rather than be destined for heartbreak with him when he will inevitably die. As Remus told him, quote, "Sometimes the best way to show your love for someone is by making the hard decision they won't."
I both commend Diem and Luther for standing up for love conquers all and encouraging Teller and Lily's relationship. And I think they are being extremely inconsiderate and a little tacky with how they handle the whole, oh, you must not love her enough attitude.
Yeah.
Teller and Lily's situation is very different from Diem and Luther's. And I think that they need to be a little bit more respectful to Teller's feelings and trust him to think for himself. If I'm going to give Diem, and I'll also include Luther in there, an L, I would do it for this here because
I'm going to actually just point, I can't believe I'm doing this. I'm just going to give an L to Luther because Diem, even when Teller leaves, she pushes him away and she's like, you're being an ass. And Luther's like, well, he needed to see what it's like to really and truly love a woman. And I agree with you. I think that putting it in the frame of, oh, well, you must not love her enough is not right.
Yeah.
And I do think that Luther is being a protective older brother here. So I think that he's coloring it in that lens, but I think it's still deserving of an L.
I know that, Diem did good job for her for calling that out as being an ass. And she also, every single time Teller brings up Lily, she's like, no, you have to go back. You have to. And he's like, stop. Just please stop.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, it's number 4, and probably the biggest reason of them all. Teller has been, and frankly, an unwilling passenger in his own life as everyone else has been making decisions for him, especially people like Orly and Diem. Their choices have led him now to lose everything, though. He wants for just once in his life to make a decision for himself. He's almost, if not already, 18 after all. He's an adult through and through, and he's ready to be treated like one. And here is Diem being like, no, I've got it. And he's like, let me handle this. This is my life. So that's why Teller is here. But then there's the Remus of it all. We know from Penn that Remus is a family man, but not in the way we normally think of that word. I loved when she said that during the Q&A. Everyone went, huh? Remus is always doing what is best for House Courbois and, of course, Remus. So if the queen's brother is here in the realm, who's to say Teller can't come in and make Remus's life hell? After all, Remus was the king's brother as well. It's one of the reasons he has so much power. So any connections to Diem could diminish Remus's position. I think he's also just so fragile because he's lost his magic. He is like, get rid of any and all threats.
I never once thought he would consider Teller a threat. He's immortal. And I say that like from Remus's
perspective. I think that Remus is not thinking clearly, first and foremost. He's grasping for anything right now. But also, he and his brothers only have their positions because they are the late king's brothers. So I figure, and he knows how closely Diem sees family.
I am going to respectfully agree to disagree on that one because I think that Remus, in his own way, is trying to get Teller to safety and to help him have a better life. So the Queen's brother's possible death, because that was very possible in Lumnos, that's why he was having to stay in the palace heavily guarded so that nobody would kill him. That's not Remus's responsibility anymore.
Okay. Maybe.
Yes.
You've opened... No. We have not phoned a pen. We do not have that confirmed. We will ask her at a later date. I think we can agree on this one. There's his daughter, Lily, who is unmarried, and her hand in marriage is a big bargaining chip for Remus politically. Is it ultimately Lily's choice? Yes, Lily made that very clear back in Glow. And Lily is a big people pleaser to her parents, and she knows that saying yes would be ultimately for the good of the family. This is why changing her mind to say no to Roderick Burnham last book was such a big deal. Remus has already attempted to marry off Lily once for political maneuverings, and the reason she said no to that marriage was Teller. So by getting Teller away, any future political marriage arrangements would be far more likely to go through for Remus and House Courbois in general.
But let's talk about how Teller received the Sophos invitation months ago at Diem's Ascension Ball, and he had no idea about it until Remus recently told him. At the time, Diem aggressively rejected their offer and said her brother was never going to Sophos. Now, we all know why she did this. Henry had recently told her about the horrors of what happens to mortals in Sophos, and Diem was genuinely trying to protect her brother. Though Teller very understandably is hurt by finding out about this invitation from someone else. For one, Diem declined for him to follow his dream that he had been hoping and working toward for years. He had no say in the matter. He didn't even know about it. Once again, a choice being taken away from him. That was like his one goal in life. And then, of course, the real kicker, this big dream that Teller had always had, Diem forgot about it.
L 12-point font, bold, capitalized L, Diem. Oh, God.
Back when brother and sister were together in Lumnos, he made Diem swear that there was no more secrets. And Diem thought that she was telling the truth because she forgot about the Sophos invitation from her Ascension Ball. Now, I will give Diem this. She does get an L, but I will give her this. Our girl's got a lot going on. And I'll be honest, this mistake is absolutely something that I would do and have to own up to. But this also ties back to Diem's anger at their mother. Family is not first priority, no matter how much Orly says that it is. Her actions speak louder than words. Same thing could be said for Diem here. She's telling Teller that he is the most important person to her, but she forgot about him having the chance to achieve his life's dream. No wonder Teller is furious with Diem. Add on that she's upset with him for being upset with her. Our girl needs to give her little brother a break and actually look at all of this from his perspective, instead of her sister knows best attitude that she's got, which is exactly what we were saying with Orly last episode, how mother knows best. Diem, we all know it was a mistake that you forgot, and it was not with malicious intent. But you definitely do get that capital L here for forgetting, for being a bully older sister right now, for not treating Teller like he's his own person and he's just her little brother. But I will give Diem this. She owns up to her mistake and profusely apologizes. She can't take back that she forgot, but she can do her best to make things right with her brother moving forward. That's the way to take accountability, Diem. And gold star to Teller for calling Diem out on her own black and white thinking. He makes Diem reflect on something that was a big theme in Glow, and I believe that in Diem's inner monologue it captures very well here, which is, quote, what did it mean to be a good person in a system built on such a fundamental bad?
As if the Kindred themselves are also tired of Diem hiding things from Teller. The 10-pointed star on her neck begins to glow, quickly engulfing the room in light, which can only mean one thing. Ophi, he's coming! Dun, dun, dun. Sorry, Teller, but the family drama, it is going to have to wait. It's not just Ophi, though. That's bad, bad, bad. Charging into the city on horseback and armed with Godstone are none other than Ophi's group of mortal rebels. We don't know how many of them there are, but I'm guessing, considering they've taken out like the city of Umbros and the villages of Miros, maybe like a couple hundred? But Nicole, how can a couple hundred mortals take out such a huge descended location? Well, Ophi has a shield wrapped tightly around each of his soldiers. So I think that right there kind of slashes the number down quite a bit. But That's really convenient. I almost picture it like the glamour that Zelaric had on Diem, Alix, and Terran back in Umbros. But this is again just showing how skilled this man is. A man who is flying on a very pissed off Gryvern, who, just like his master, has been festering his anger for centuries.
So I asked Pen about like where his Gryvern has been all this time. She would not answer that question,
That's
unfortunately.
fair. I want to say he went back to the homeworld.
The homeworld is destroyed because I asked Pen that. And she's like, no, like the homeworld is gone. Like you can't go back there.
Then he went to a different world.
I think he's been on Amarian all this time because there's another point where it's like, ooh, like could there be more of people like Diem and Ophiuchi hiding in the shadows? And like it's almost like I don't think that there are more of them because that gets a little bit more. Everybody has a lot of power,
That's
but I
OP.
do think that his Gryvern has been hiding somewhere, and I wonder if that is where these poor descended children are.
Speaking of things we asked Pen, as I was working on this part of the map of the outline, so that the pre-outline to the outline, I was sitting at a breakfast table with Pen Cole herself, and I was able to ask her every single annoying question that came into my mind as I was working on this outline, which I'm so excited to go through as we sprinkle in these little tidbits of information throughout this classic FFG battle walkthrough.
She also said there's a lot of Easter eggs in this battle, so let's see what we can find.
I feel like we barely found all of them.
Oh, no, yeah, absolutely not. But first, we have to mention just how utterly fucked Sophos is for this attack. This realm is full of scholars. They're academics, researchers, inventors, engineers. They are not warriors. The Sophos Gryvern is plump and pampered. He's not ready for battle. Yes, there are guards, but they're used to guarding libraries and ruins and handling crimes like stolen books, not charging into battle. And there are limited weapons here too, because the shipments from House Bennett and Lumnos keep getting disrupted by the rebels. And all of the army soldiers nearby, they left to secure Umbros after its attack. So all in all, things are looking bad for this city now under attack.
As Diem goes up to Doriel and Luther to create some sort of plan, the crown of Sophos is like, why do you have his sigil on your neck? Remember, a big reason Doriel did not want to take Diem up on her bargain was because of how sus Diem was that she was connected to this man. This is Doriel's worst fear in their eyes being confirmed. If she has his mark, then Diem must have brought Ophiuchi here to Sophos to either destroy the city or threaten Doriel into taking Diem's deal. I mean, from Doriel's POV, this does look sus. Again, that's why I'm like never wanting to damn this person, because from their POV, everything makes sense. Especially because when Doriel refuses to release Luther's magic, Diem then uses Umbros magic to get them to do it. To be fair, they need Luther's magic in order to fight against Ophiuchi. But still, from Doriel's point of view, this looks controlling and bad.
But Diem won't give up on trying to urge Doriel to not look at her as the enemy right now. Doriel needs to do something, anything, to protect their people. And Doriel, as an academic, is a little frozen here in this moment with the oncoming attack. But they need to step up as a leader and actively do something. They're a crown of Amarian, and the Kindred have chosen them to protect their people, which is the tough words that Doriel needed to hear to agree to work with Diem to make moves. We also find out that Ophiuchi has his own crown, and it is a 10-pointed star. And I have a quick story about this 10-pointed star. The night before the Everflame ball, we were all up late preparing the special edition books for attendees. And I noticed the 10-pointed star on the spine of the dust jacket. And I was so excited. I was like, oh my God, everybody, look. And that's when Penn pointed out, and are you all ready for this? The 10-pointed star symbol has been in the books since Spark. The symbol is literally the design for the space breaks in the series that Nicole just showed here for our YouTube listeners. And it's at the top of the map that's at the beginning of every single book. You know what's at the bottom of the map? I'll tell you soon. I'm so excited.
With the incoming rebels shielded by Ophiuchi, the only way for them to even have a hope of dwindling their numbers is to get Ophiuchi far enough away from the city so that his magic putters out and fails around the mortal rebels. Because Doriel is the only one with a Gryvern. I love when Diem is like, because my Gryvern is with the Regent because you won't coronate me. It's just, I do really enjoy her handing Doriel a silver platter of, do you see how hard you're making my life right now and this war for me to fight? Anyway, because Doriel is the only one with a Gryvern, they will take Vexus and attempt to lure Ophiuchi out and away from the city. But that leaves everyone in the city. Luckily, there's some hope. If they use Godstone blades, then maybe, hopefully, they'll be able to penetrate Ophiuchai's shield around the soldiers. Only one problem. Who's got Godstone? The Sophos archives do. But those are antiques. They're a piece of history. And you will be too if you don't use any. Pause. From my morning chat with Penn and also from the Q&A at the Everflame Ball, we know that this archive stash is going to come back into play, so we are watching them very carefully during this battle. Lexi, especially. She texted me in all caps yesterday, and I'm so excited for her to go through her findings. Diem sends Stuart and some of the guards to grab the painfully few Godstone weapons that Sophos has locked away in the archives. Those without weapons will round up the civilians and get them inside and out of the war zone to barricade the doors. And then those remaining who do have their own weapons, which is a wildly small number, those soldiers will follow Diem into the streets to protect the city from the rebels. What about Luther's plan, though? Luther spots a familiar face among the Guardians. It's Vance, who is holding with his singular arm a familiar jewel-hilted weapon. It is time for Luther to go get his family's sword back. Note, neither Luther or Diem are saying that the other needs to go get into cover and save themselves, a thing that we've literally been keeping account of during this book. But like we discussed the last few episodes, we are in a new era of Luther and Diem, where Luther specifically has promised that he will not throw her behind him anymore and try to protect her. And right now, they are both upholding this promise. Growth. More on this later.
For this battle, it is so cool seeing Diem utilize the different magics that she uniquely has. She uses her Phanos magic to tell the horses that the attacking rebels are riding to throw them, trample them, drag them away, which causes absolute chaos. She used a wall of stone to block the rebels earlier as they were coming in, so she was at least able to hold them off for a very short while, but at least it was something.
Well, okay, so question, because as she makes this stone wall, quote, a sudden crack rippled through the air as a bolt of lightning shot into the sky from near the library. And then it's just never mentioned again. So what is this lightning bolt? Because the only other time we've seen lightning on the page was at the Kindred Temple, where a bolt of lightning shot into the stone and everything went to hell.
That's a good catch. I guess I always just thought that it was Ophiuchai using his spark magic to crack it, and maybe he was over near the library, but that was purely an assumption, and I would not be surprised because we clearly know from Penn that there's a lot more to the moon and the sun, and maybe lightning's in there too.
Well, what if that was when Stuart and co went to the archives in the library and got a certain weapon and took it out of and they were like bringing it to battle.
That's very interesting.
That is, we'll touch more on that in a moment. I do not want to trample on your toes. We'll get more to that in a moment.
Diem is using Arboros magic to get roots to sprout and trip these rebels. She's using her water to push the attackers back, carpet of ice to make them slip, a gauntlet of stone to make them climb. At first, Diem is trying to hide all this other magic she has, but the people of Sophos are smart cookies. They're kind of known for that, and they're starting to get mighty curious about all these magics in the vicinity. Soon enough, Diem will have to throw any caution to the wind because ultimately survival and protecting the city is way more important than keeping her abilities a secret. These rebels get closer to Diem and almost attack her, but then they recognize the 10-pointed star marked on Diem that Ophiuchai gave her through the foraging magic back in Montios. So now we see why Ophiuchai marked her. It's his way of protecting Diem and sparing her from his minions. One of the rebels wants to ignore the mark on her and kill her anyway because she's working for the other side after all. But then we hear his comrade say, we can't afford to lose his help. So from this one line, we can deduce just how much weight and importance Ophiuchai has for this rebel group. I mean, it's obvious, but I still have to point that out. They need him, and he's clearly in charge here, where they have to blindly trust him. Later on, there will be an exchange with Vance, and Luther will point out to him, you are about to kill a mortal for a descended, as if he's like, that's different.
Exactly. I love the line where it's like, as if something approaching an intelligent thought came into his mind. Yes. It's so good. So naturally, Diem realizing this mark from Ophiuchai is protection, it's quite surprising. I have a feeling this is going to be a really, really big thing for Diem in Burn. Diem is going to have to deal with the narrative that Ophiuchai isn't 100% evil. And not gonna lie, I kind of love that he's not just evil through and through, although he is definitely evil, don't get me wrong. We know from Penn, from that Q&A at the Everflame Ball, that a huge theme in Burn is going to be monsters aren't born, they're made. And absolutely Ophi Ukai is going to be in that thematic category.
Absolutely. In fact, the only two characters Penn mentioned and kind of like a follow-up with all of that who can go kick rocks are Ileana and Gareth.
And with Ophi Ukai, again, I'm leaning into he is evil, don't get me wrong. He's destroying cities. He's killing a lot of people. He wants vengeance, and I can't wait to learn why.
I just want to know what happened on the Kindred's homeworld. I have a feeling Omnos wanted to rule over the mortals as immortal gods, whereas his kindred siblings wanted to integrate more with the humans. But we also know from Montios' diary that Omnos was not as scared about what happened on their homeworld as the rest of the siblings. So did something happen to him to make him a monster back in their homeworld? Or if Omnos is not Ophi Ukai, which we're just always kind of like making an assumption that he is, but we have to point out that we do not know that. That is simply our theory. I also have some pretty strong evidence that they are not the same person later this episode. Ophi Ukai may have sided with the rebels during the Blood War, and being as powerful as he was, the crowns locked him up. So he's always been against the Descended and the Kindred because his father Omnos and any offspring have been shunned.
I can't wait to hear your logic. I will keep an open mind.
I figured it out Penn was right there too, and her chuckles, her evil little chuckles right there.
Well, going back to Diem's feelings on all of this, because everyone around her, specifically Luther and Oralee, like we mentioned last episode, they see Ophi Ukai as this big bad. He is the villain of our story. But Diem, she's going to see some good in him because of this move he just did. He marked her. He wants to protect her. And I know that I love Diem so much, but she is going to cling on to this deep down buried goodness that he will have with all abandoned. This is a total assumption, but based on her previous actions, I feel this being a huge internal conflict for her next book.
I could definitely see that too. I also wonder if that's another reason that Ophi Ukai did that, where he knows that she already has tried to kill him once, but he had already marked her. But I think that he is doing that so it's like, we'll see, like, look, I'm protecting you, so maybe you shouldn't try to kill me.
I could totally see him doing that kind of emotional manipulation. Absolutely. But she does not have time to focus on this odd protection from her birth father because Doriel is falling out of the sky. But they're caught by Ophi Ukai and his Gryvern, which is good and bad because the Gryvern pierces Doriel through the gut with its claw and then keeps flying around as poor Doriel is bleeding out with a claw through them. Thank you for the reenactment, Lexi. They're hopeless. They're forced to watch from the sky as their own city gets attacked. As Zephyrus and co. make another pass, the Gryvern's mouth opens wide, unleashing a wave of dragon fire. Instinctively, Diem casts out her own magic to protect everyone around her, including the mortal rebels, obviously because it's Diem. She raises her shield and locks eyes with Ophi Ukai, and her godhood raises up, telling her to fight, fight, fight. Now remember, Stuart and co. who went off to the archives to get some weapons, they gave a sword to Diem. And this sword now is tingling at Diem's side. A strange buzzing energy that feels like its own godhood. Quote, its voice, whispering of a storied fate trapped within its gilded embrace. We know that this sword was a priceless heirloom that belonged to a kindred, and it's one we're going to talk a lot about. But what magic is this that the sword has its own godhood? Does it have its own godhood, or is it the magic that is the godhood from the kindred forged into the sword? I don't know.
It feels like most of what was from the original world has this sentient magic within it, including the Heartstone, which I am going to be getting a whole lot into later. So I do think that it's not like the exact same kind of godhood that is within the people, but it is still I'll call it a godhood, but it is that sentience that does exist, this magic that has its own mind. And I do think that, yes, it is right there. But here with the storied fate, like, oh my gosh, this is just her destined sword. So I do have a question as we're talking about the storied fate and it being her destiny. Which kindred kind of has to do with this? For instance, was it Omnos's? And the fact that it was his just got lost to history. Maybe the sword did not belong to any particular kindred, and this is all the kindred just guiding her toward her destiny as what's happening with all the crowns and things like that. Or could this be the gift that Mother Lumnos has been referring to?
Well, I'll throw out another option. We know that from Montios's diary, there was the even our ma. What if this is ma-z? What if this sword is muz?
I really do think it's mother.
I think it's mother,
again,
too.
that's another thing that Penn Cole said during our Q&A with her, that while we will not rediscover those ripped pages because they have been destroyed, we will clearly be able to deduce what was going to be said next.
Oh my God. All of this to say, this sword's godhood is buzzing to Diem, leaving her with a hunch. Diem draws the sword, and its voice grows louder. Quote, "The language foreign, but the message clear. Fight." The language? Like the Kindred's language? Okay, more things from the Penn Cole Q&A because it's never ending. We know that we will be discovering what language is written on this blade. We can strongly assume that the language that's written on the blade and this language that it's speaking to Diem that says fight is the same language. But we learned from Penn that we are going to learn what's on the sword / what this language is from someone who's alive. But it's not who we think. I took that it's not who we think to mean it's not Ophi. So is it Diem who is going to know how to decipher it? Almost like because right now she's able to hear what the language is. She thinks it's saying fight. So is Diem going to be the one who decodes it?
I don't know if that's the exact same thing. I feel like she's hearing fight, and then she's also hearing this like ancient language, which Penn did confirm is the kindred language. This also reminds me back when she was destroying the Godstone back in Fortos, in the Fortos cell, and she felt like there was an ancient words being said to her, but she couldn't quite understand them. I don't have the passage right in front of me, but I do think that's all very, very tied in here together. So I'll say this. I think that this person who Penn says is going to be able to help us translate it and how it's not somebody who we think, I think that it is someone outside of the inner circle. I remember back in Umbros, there was someone who knew the ancient ways of forging raw Godstone. So it makes me think of someone in Umbros, not that person in particular, but there is this knowledge that has been passed down generation to generation. Or I keep going back to the other important artifacts that are hidden in Sophos. There's got to be a translation dictionary there, right? Although when I did ask Penn that, she's like, no, it is someone. So yeah, watch it be Orly. What? And maybe Ophi taught her the ancient language for over all those months that they had, and then she now knows it.
I don't think so.
You think that's a fun theory?
I think that's a fun theory, Lexi.
It's fair. I'm just throwing people around now. Maybe it's Stuart, our boy Stuart.
Oh my God, please let it be Stuart. I hope it's Stuart. I love him.
I don't think it's, although he does work in libraries. Who knows? Who knows? Back to the battle. This is going to be a reoccurring theme. There's so much going on in this episode. Ophiakai's Gryvern breathes dragon fire on Diem. Oh no! Except, what's this? She does not get burned by the dragon fire. Now, this does not have the same comforting warmth that Sarai's fire has when it breathes on Diem. This fire from Ophiakai's Gryvern has this bone-deep intensity, but Diem remains untouched. I am under the impression that Dragonfire can burn a crown of a different realm, like how Montios's Gryvern's Dragonfire engulfed your cell. And it makes sense that with Diem being the eventual crown of all the realms, that the Dragonfire does not affect her. So because she hails from this Gryvern's realm, from Omnos's realm, could that be enough reason for her not to burn? Or because Diem is so other, there is no way for any Dragonfire to get to her. That's what I'm leaning toward. These weapons, including Godstone and Gryvern's from the Kindred's homeworld, does not affect her like it does for everyone else. And especially with Dragonfire and burning and Everflame, yeah.
I'm definitely leaning towards the latter. I think that it's like, I almost think of it as whenever she's quote unquote burned by Dragonfire, it's the similar, maybe not to the same level, but it's a similar effect of when people use magic against her because she feels this tingling. It's not hot and cold though. So that's why I'm saying it's similar but different. But I want to bring up something from one of my morning chats with Penn because Again, I told you I asked all the annoying questions. I asked her if Ophiuchi is immune to dragonfire like Diem is, and I did not expect her to answer, but she did. She said no. So Ophi can be hurt or some equivalent by dragonfire. What does this mean? I don't know, because then that sent everything spiraling. Because if Ophiuchi is from this kindred world, then there goes our entire theory. So I wonder if this is an Everflame thing instead.
Yeah!
Like, because Diem is connected to the undying fire, she cannot be harmed by any type of fire. Remember, back in Spark, in the burning building, she wasn't hurt.
Yes, I am definitely going with this is an Everflame thing. This is Everflame protection. And
final answer.
Yep, final answer. On a similar note, during our Q&A, we did ask Penn if Ophiuchi and Diem have all of the same magic. And she said no comment. It was one of her very few answers that she would not answer. And she said because it would just give too much away. So,
but while we're talking about Dragonfire, we need to talk about Zephyrus, Ophiuchi's Gryvern. Zephyrus has a horned reptilian head, red-tipped wings, and black fur, and a red, black, and silver color palette. Now, red, black, and silver color palette typically represents power and mystery. Sounds about right. Now, I looked up the meaning of Zephyrus, and I found literally nothing, except for a Steam account and an Indie Stone account that enjoyed breaking street lamps with a sledgehammer. Now, if we're adjusting some spellings, like a lot, there's a giant fish called Xiphicutaneus, which is extracted from Greek and Latin to mean sword ray. Now, this is an extinct fish that was terrifying. It was a big fish that could literally grow up to 16 to 20 feet. I don't think that's where Zephyrus came from. So I went back to the constellations where we can strongly assume Ophiuchi came from, aka Ophiuchus. There is another constellation called Dorado, but this also has an alternative name called Zephyus. What does Zephyus mean? Swordfish! At this point, it all keeps coming back to the scary-ass swordfish, and that's all I've got. Penn Cole, you've stumped me. I'm not starting Fish Watch.
okay, can I have something to add to this? When I plugged this exact same name into Google, it changed it to Cerberus, which is the three-headed hound of Hades, and it is known for guarding the gates of the underworld to prevent the dead from leaving. And I mentioned this to Penn, and she kind of was like, oh, look at you, kind of thing. She didn't confirm or deny, but I think that it is in reference to the three-headed dog from Hades who, you know, guards the underrealm, who is his companion and all of that kind of stuff. Watching Doriel crash helplessly to the ground, which, real quickly, good thing that Doriel is no longer skewered by the claw, Diem rushes to heal them. Obviously, the current plan is not working in this battle here, and it is time for a new one. Doriel is going to find Stuart and the two Descended with him, and these two Descended will mount Vexus with Doriel to take off back into the sky. Who are these two Descended, you ask, that are to go up into the skies with Doriel? One is from Phanos, who will try to find ways to intervene with Ophiuchi's Gryvern, and the second is a Miros Descended, who will use their wind to slow Ophiuchi and boost Vexus. And it's not just these two Descended who are working together in this battle. Out in the streets, Descended from different realms are all using their magical abilities in tandem, uniting against their common enemy.
There's that theme for us again, unity, people working together no matter their race or realm of origin. I can absolutely see people from this Sophos battle joining Diem's side in her army because of how the battle worked out and how they worked together in that unity. Maybe there's some people who won't based off of Diem's actions later, but that's for a future conversation. But speaking of things that work well together, Diem and Zephyrus's claw. In a blur of black and red and silver, Diem finds herself pinned with the Gryvern's talons, luckily around her throat and not skewered through her. Not very nice, Zephyrus. Even while trapped, Diem still can't look away from her sire on top of his Gryvern. She notes that she sees herself in him, from his physical features to how he holds himself. But even though there's no denying their relation, Ophi speaks to Diem without emotion, just simply stating the fact that he's, quote, the the man who gave you life. Talk about Father of the Year. And he admits that the only reason Diem will be spared from what's to come is because she released him, again with her blood on the Heartstone and yada yada. Right now, Ophi seems to not only be in a rage, but he is also pleased when Diem shows her own anger too. Is this pleased look because he knows that if she's angry enough, she's not all that different from the Guardians who are fighting with him and therefore easier to get on his side? Or because he sees some of himself and his anger and rage in her?
Both.
Yeah.
I think both, yeah. I think it's important to note how Ophi is speaking to Diem. His voice is not just heard, it is felt. It is piercing her thoughts and feeling nowhere and everywhere at the same time. This feels so otherworldly, almost like a Kindred's voice. And maybe he's even using Umbros magic in this moment with how he's saying, like, with how it's described as piercing her thoughts. I'm not quite sure, though.
So I also noted this because in the dialogue, if we're looking just grammatically, it's written as if in normal dialogue. There's quotes and there's no italicized or anything like that. But then because of this isn't the first time, it would be the grammar is in her point of view, meaning there's moments from Umbros where the same dialogue was written that way, but it was in her mind. So I actually took this to mean Umbros magic, but maybe it is that otherworldly kindred, but it's using that voice with Umbros magic. So it's both. Again, it's both.
Diem asks what he means by what's coming, and when Ophi doesn't answer, she follows up with the people in the city are under her protection and she will not let him hurt them. To which Ophi says he can see the 3 crowns within her, and then with a hook of his finger, he makes the crowns shoot up out of her head. They strain over Diem's head as if he could rip her head from her neck to steal them away. How does he do this? While Ophi says he's impressed with the crowns she's collected, Diem can smell the hunger and see it in his eyes how badly he wants these crowns. Remember what Orly said he used to tell her, how he wanted to be king and rule all of Amarian.
No matter what, I don't think that even if Diem went to work with Ophi, he's so power hungry. I just don't think he'll be able to hold himself back from taking her off the board because he'll believe that if she's dead after he's killed all the other descended, he's the only one left to rule Amarian.
I agree, yeah.
Oh, that's bad. Diem, please realize this ASAP.
So she has, yeah, she knows.
Well, she has, and yet she's still very much like, I don't think I can kill him. Like, he's still got good in him. He wants to protect me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in this moment, Ophi pitches Diem to come to his side. If she wants to rule these people, protect them, give them a better world, together he and her can make it happen.
During another morning chat with Pen, I asked her how important this "together we can make a better world" statement is from Ophi in regards to Burn. And she laughed and said, very. Now, is this very because he's going to keep trying to get her on his side because he knows with both of them that they'd be unstoppable? Or is it because he knows she refuses to work with him and this will be the reason his protection for her goes away?
Maybe both. I think he is very much a Thanos villain, which you wouldn't know anything about, Nicole, because you don't watch Marvel.
Wow.
But it's this violent villain who genuinely believes they are doing what's best for mankind.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
Ophi believes that.
So I think in Burn, there will be a big theme of what does a better world look like, and more specifically, for who? For all the people as they unite against evil, like Diem and Luther envision, for Ophi ruling over only mortals, and a better world is all the descended dead, for the crowns who just want things to go back to the way that they were, where the mortals are oppressed and the descended, have their good lives. But what's more, Ophi says that he will keep killing the descended because there are debts that must be paid. Debts that must be paid?
What? Debts? Because I don't think he's talking about his imprisonment, especially considering when Diem brings that up just a few lines later, he's furious at the thought of it. I think this debts he's referring to is something entirely else. But what debts?
I will say, I do think that part of the debts is his imprisonment and all of that.
Oh, okay.
But I don't think that it's all to the story.
I
Remember
agree.
the prophecy that yourself said in chapter 1 of Spark, quote, life for life, old debt requires, or eternal be his yoke. What if Ophi thinks that he is fulfilling his own prophecy? The first half has already been fulfilled, which he 20 years ago was actively trying to fulfill, and then Diem did it on her own. But maybe this is his own interpretation of old debts paid and what eternal be his yoke means, which we have been pretty stumped on. Like, it sounds like it would be like everything of, old debts must be paid, life for life, all that kind of stuff, or Ophi rules over everything. But maybe he has a different interpretation where all this stuff happens and he gets to rule over everything. Diem puts on her "you are very misunderstood" empathy hat and acknowledges Ophi. He really must be angry. She gets it. And yeah, I'm not sure that was the right thing to say. Ophi makes it very clear he is more than angry that he was locked away for centuries left to rot. And he has lots of plans for all the ways he'll make sure he'll never be forgotten again. And there's that word "forgot" as it pertains to Diem being the daughter of the forgotten. Diem digs herself a bigger hole as she continues trying to appeal to Ophi in the same way that she has tried to appeal to the Guardians. She understands she would be angry too, but you can't punish the innocents. Just, you gotta draw the line there. And that really does not go over well, as Ophi cuts her off, exploding. "You dare tell me what I cannot do?" Even Diem's godhood cowers. This is one scary motherfucker. And as he approaches Diem, the sword that Diem is holding thrums with a restless energy. I swear it's saying, "Let me at him, let me at him. This is what I was destined to do." Then we have Ophi noting that fire burns within Diem and that it can be useful, but he also warns that the brightest flame can be extinguished. On the surface, this fire can be correlated to her anger and passion and determination, but I really think it has a double meaning in the way Nicole is freaking out right now too. I think she agrees that it is the Everflame as well, and that it burns within her. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, this evil villain monologue is cut short because Doriel lets out a victory shout from atop Vexus and comes out of nowhere and collides straight into Ophi and Diem. This sends Diem to the ground and it knocks Ophi and his Gryvern through the air. Whoa! Go Doriel! Saving Diem like that and taunting Ophi and his Gryvern. Doriel sends a spark of energy into Zephyrus, causing him to tumble to the ground, to which Doriel promptly gets the hell out of here, knowing Ophi is about to target them with the help of the two descendant also riding on Vexus still, of course. But this attack does not keep Ophi down for long. Jumping up, Ophi mounts his Gryvern, heals his Gryvern, and launches into the air after Doriel. Good news, the plan to get Ophi further away from the battle, and therefore his shield over his rebel attackers will no longer work. It seems to be working this time. He's going further and further away.
With Doriel and Ophi in their standoff, Ophi's aura begins to ease. Yay! Now there's a chance! There are hundreds of angry Guardian attackers. Time to protect the city against them!
Oh yeah, because now that Ophi is further away, his magical shield protecting these rebels vanishes and they are all finally vulnerable.
Now it is easy for us to instantly think of a lot of FMCs who would very quickly take these Guardians off the board in a very permanent way. And we know that many are frustrated with Diem's decision here to not do that. But we want to challenge everyone and look through Diem's POV and really lean into why, in her eyes, this was the smart decision for the war overall. Because instead of taking out all the mortal rebels, she uses her Umbros magic to get in their minds and convince them to leave. Not unlike the Centenary did at the Ascension Ball in Glow. So reason number one behind her decision doing this, Diem views the mortals as her people. She is fighting for one Amarian, not just a section of it on her side that has been deemed worthy enough to live. But as Penn mentioned to us during the Q&A, a huge theme for the series is villains aren't born, they're made. These people aren't evil to their core to Diem. Instead, people like Vance and Ophi, who are so full of hate, poisoned these rebels' minds and weaponized them for Ophi's own vengeance. So because of that, are these soldiers who are just doing the bidding of those they follow truly the enemy? To Diem, the answer is no, which again, I think will be a huge theme in Burn. When is someone's mind too far poisoned to the point that it is irreversible, and where can they be given an antidote, so to speak, to come to the good side? Again, thinking, talking a little bit more black and white. But there's a second reason. There is a moment during the battle that really does get in Diem's head. As Diem is fighting the mortals, she's pulling back her blows to ensure no one is hurt or killed. She comes across an old patient of hers, one who knows Orly well-ish, probably because they were a guardian. Remember back in the last set of chapters when Orly said that she recognized some of Ophi's guardians, but the common factor between them was they all believed that Orly was too soft as a guardian leader. Well, here's one of them. But as Diem tries to tell the man that she's not only fighting for the Descended, but the mortals too, he says, quote, "Are you? Because all I see is mortal blood on your blade and the Descended fighting at your back." This man, and likely the Guardians alongside him, only see Diem as the enemy. And these words spook Diem. They get into her head.
Just like it did earlier in Arboros when Vance taunted her that she killed a mortal to save a Descended.
Yeah. She views them as her own people. And to hear that these mortals see her as evil, it makes Diem's own sheer will try to prove them wrong. We saw her do this in a very different scale back in Lumnos, when she was in the square and people were saying how the queen has abandoned the mortals. It made her feel like she needed to prove them wrong, and she did in a very public way. She is not evil, and here she wants to prove that she is fighting for all of them at the end of the day, and by doing that, she needs to not kill everyone.
It goes back to there being definitions of sides in this war. There's how Ophiuchi and Vance's rebels see the sides, mortal versus descended. Then there's how the crowns view these sides, Amarian versus the Guardians. And lastly, we have Diem's side, which is basically good versus evil. And it's the hardest to define because, like Nicole was saying, what truly is evil? You can't measure it in the same kind of way as you can with the others, where it's demographics and geography and things like that.
While this is a very noble stance on Diem's part, and God, I love that Diem believes in this type of redemption, there are some repercussions that she, at least in my opinion, isn't thinking all the way through when she makes this call, and especially when she'll let Vance loose in a few chapters. But we'll get into all of those pros versus cons in a moment, because with the Guardians retreating thanks to her Umbros magic, let's zero in on that sword that Diem is holding. We have held back long enough.
Oh my God. Yeah, you did not think that we were done talking about the sword, right? Okay, let's go through everything we know about this sword now that we are seeing it in real life and not just in Diem and Luther's visions. It's a broadsword that bears a gilded, finely carved handle, and it has a glittering onyx blade as wide as Diem's thigh, inlaid with golden scroll work. Now, real quickly, because while we do not hear from Diem in this moment where we're getting all this description, we can gather that this glittering onyx blade is Godstone. Earlier, Agard said these are all the Godstone weapons that we have from the archives. So considering this was one of those weapons, we can make that assumption here. On this blade, there's a delicate filigree, which if you're like me and did not know what that was, it is a form of intricate metalwork. And it almost seems like these patterns are words, but not in any language Diem recognizes. Yes, this is the kindred language we were talking about earlier. I think what's written on it is going to be so key to defeating a kindred. Like what yourself said about how a kindred can be killed, it's just that no one knows. Or it ties directly into the prophecy because, again, that storied fate and the destiny and all of that kind of stuff, I could see it being there too. What if it's one of the ancient truths that it's like she knows but is not fully ready to know? Again, calling back to that experience that she had when she was destroying the Godstone in Fortos. So Diem has to embrace who she is as a kindred, and then she will know this language.
It's almost like when she was embracing her godhood, her magic, it all flooded into her at once, and she was able to use it without the heavy training montage that we are used to in fantasy stories. So what if this language is, like you're saying, kind of similar?
Exactly, yeah. And it's like, it's one of the truths that she has not come to know yet, and she's not ready yet, but when she is ready, then she will know it. That would fall in line with what Penn said about how it's not the person you think it is, because we certainly would not think that it is Diem, since she clearly does not know it right now. Back to the description of the sword here, the swirls and lines weave around a glassy disc embedded in the center of the blade. And this glassy disc is so dark it is nearly black, but it still radiates a smoky internal glow. So when I read this description for the first time, I could have sworn that it reminded me of something. So I flipped back through and I found something very interesting that it reminded me of. The Heartstone. Going back to the coronation ceremony from Glow, we got this description of the Heartstone. Quote, glassy on its smoother faces, the smoky color so dark it appeared black, though a faint glow seemed to emanate from within. You all, that is almost a one-to-one description as this glassy disc embedded in this blade that used to be of the kindreds and that Diem feels called to. Oh my God, I was absolutely freaking out when this all came together for me yesterday. I could not believe it. I'm still getting shivers and chills right now. Okay, so This glassy disc embedded in the center of this blade, it has to be a piece of the Heartstone or of the Heartstone's original source. Oh! What do we know? What do we know about the Heartstone? It is a conduit of the second kind of magic that exists. The earth, the air, every planet and creature, quote, it allowed the kindred to weave their magic into this world and control how it can be used. So maybe this is a crack theory, but I wonder if this weapon will serve as a conduit for the balance that Diem represents. I'm still processing this revelation, but yeah, there is part of the Heartstone in this sword that is called to Diem.
Well, what if this one will rise is that one true Amarian will rise, but in order to do that, a new, for lack of a better term, like a foraging spell needs to be cast. And the Heartstone, we both assume, is going to be destroyed in this book series, right?
I think so. I think that at least the Kindred's temple will be. I could see the Heartstone having a new foraging spell cast on it. I think that this sword is going to be key in that.
Yes.
I also
what
think,
if it, like King Arthur style, is squished into the Heartstone? Because apparently the Heartstone's massive. I thought it was just like a little teeny tiny egg, and Pen was like, no.
Better than when I was like, oh, I kind of always thought of it like a fountain, like a bird bath. And she's like, you thought the Heartstone was a bird bath? And thank goodness her PA was on my side and agreed with me. And so we had to explain how it's like, yeah, it was like a bird bath like thing, you know, like with like a little dome thing in the center. And she's like, no.
Nothing like explaining your own visions of what the author created to the author herself. And she's like, what the fuck are you talking about?
It's a horror face, yeah.
Anyway.
Overall, Diem admires how this sword is a true piece of art, and she recognizes it as the sword she holds in every vision of the battlefield. You know where else this sword appears? On the map of all the books. That's right. Go to the map in the physical book and see the bottom. This sword is there center right, with Luther's sword of Courbois on the left.
And it even has a little disc in it.
It does have the disc in it. Exactly. Yes. And an interesting looking crown is there in the middle between these two swords. And you know what? It looks like it's made out of maybe wood and sparks. I'm calling it. That is the crown of the Everflame. And I don't think it's like these kindred crowns that we're used to. I think that it is a representation of the Everflame here. Because when you first look at this crown, it's like, oh, it's a crown of Amarian. It does not look like any of the crowns that it's supposed to look like. And it looks very mortal-ish with the sparks on it. Exactly, the wood. Everflame. Oh my God. And while we're on the map, we also get a sun and a moon in the little corners there, which Penn confirmed during our Q&A that the sun and moon have a much bigger meaning in our story. I am freaking out in the best way possible. I can't even talk right now. Okay, sorry, I got distracted by the map. As we know, the sword came from Sophos archives and once belonged to the Kindred, but it seems clear that the sword is meant to be Diem's. The blade is literally pulsing with a soft, silvery glow in her hand. That sounded dirty. But then there's that silvery glow that we all associate with the Kindred again. And I'm even going to say with the moon, with the sun too, because now apparently we got to reference that for everything as well. And Diem feels inherently protective and possessive over this sword like it is now hers.
You know what my favorite part of this episode is?
What?
The fact that we hung out with Penn Cole before we wrote this outline, because we have more information about this sword. Firstly, we know that this sword's name is Sorrow's Edge, and it's apparently very aptly named, which gives me 100 questions. We know that the sword belonged to a kindred, so we can assume it was also from the kindred home world and brought over. And we know that there was a lot of war and hate back in their home world before coming to Amarian. So was this sword created in order to, I'll say, bring sorrow? Like it was like a sorrow bringer in their world? Or I know you said it might have been Omnos' sword. I know then I brought up the mother. What if it was Lumnos' sword? Because she was filled with so much sorrow when she used it against people.
I see that as well, absolutely. Like, what if it is the sword that has already defeated Omnos? It has part of the Heartstone rock embedded in it. How many more times can I say that? Because I'm so stinking proud of myself for figuring that out. So what if the sword sealed the sacrifice that the kindred made to get rid of their brother? I think this blade is what needs to be used to right the ancient wrong as well. And that it is whatever was used for the original sacrifice again. Like, it has to be this sword. We also have to remember the Heartstone repelled Diem on the island, where it was hard for her to even be in its presence. But Sorrow's Edge has the opposite effect. So what if the Heartstone was trying to prevent Diem from breaking Ophiuchi out? And now Sorrow's Edge calls to her because now it is up to her to defeat Ophiuchi.
All we know is that this sword is not done in our story. Thank God.
We haven't had an episode like this where I am just like giddy. Like, yes, Umbros, but like that was all stuff that kind of we'd already been talking about and all that kind of stuff. But this is like, this is why we deep dive. Okay, rewinding a little, as the battle winds down, there is one person Diem cannot find. Luther, where are you? And she becomes very panicked that she cannot find her prince. But have no fear, her prince will never die off page. He returns to his queen after the battle, and not only is he reunited with Diem, but he's also reunited with the sword of Courbois. Huzzah!
With Luther back in Diem's arms, you'd think she'd be thrilled and overjoyed. Yes, and she's pissed at Luther. Now, I do love this because this feels so relatable to me. You know, when you and like someone you love, you're going to meet up and the time rolls around and you're there, you're at the coffee shop, but they're not. And you wait and wait and wait and wait. And suddenly it's 15 to 30 minutes later and you're freaking out that they were in a crash or they slipped on their way out of the shower or they were bitten by a rare poisonous spider in the car and then drove off a cliff. My mind is fine. The truth is, when they finally arrived, they just weren't able to text or call you. Their phone died, they left it at home, or they're such a careful driver that they didn't want to risk getting it out. And you were so relieved that they're okay, they're with you, but you're also like irrationally angry at them. And I'll speak for myself here. But in those moments, I'm really more mad at myself for getting so worked up and letting my mind run away with anxiety. It's like the residual fear and terror needs an outlet, and sometimes you just attach it to the easiest person who you can attach it to. Is it a good pattern to be in? Fuck no, absolutely not. This is why Brett and I actually have a common saying in our house, which is like, I'm not mad at you, I'm mad at me, or I'm not mad at you, I'm mad at the situation, which is always so helpful for my sweet people-pleasing husband to not feel like I'm suddenly angry at him for no reason. But right now, Diem doesn't have the vocab of I'm not mad at you, I'm mad at the situation, because she was terrified of losing Luther again. This is now the second, and actually not second, third time in almost a week where Luther almost died on her. And something has really changed with them recently. She has so wholly given herself to him that she is terrified what she would turn into. Note not who she would turn into, what she would turn into should he be gone. I am going to give, even though, yes, this is so relatable, I am still going to give Diem a lowercase l for this moment. It's going to be in that 9-point font again, but it is a lowercase l nonetheless. Luther promised Diem that he was going to let her fight her own battles because he knows she is strong enough to protect herself, just like he is strong enough to protect himself in battle. He is releasing control and stress and instead trusting his partner to take care of herself. Am I faulting Diem for freaking out and being terrified because her love is missing? No, of course not. But what she is giving that 9-point lowercase l for is how she talks to him after, saying how she needed him and he should have been there with her and how he abandoned her. And he's like, I'm doing exactly what you wanted from me, and that is give you space. And I am really proud of him for standing his ground as she realizes her anger is actually fear.
Yes, I agree with all of that wholeheartedly. We learned from Luther's POV section that after he left Diem, he went on the hunt to find Vance and get the Sword of Courbois back. Exactly what he said he was going to do. Chasing at, which again, like I understand it, she thought that he might be dead. They were just in a battle. So I understand that. And he was doing what she told him to. Anyway, chasing after Vance, Luther found him running into a descended elementary school. And when Luther followed Vance inside, Vance was holding the Sword of Courbois to the teacher's throat in front of the children. And the teacher was a mortal herself, who is a badass, by the way.
I also started thinking about this because Vance going to a place with descended children, we know from Penn-Cole at the Q&A that we are going to learn more about Vance's backstory. We might be learning about a family he had or about a daughter or a younger sibling that maybe he was a young warthog and his younger siblings died when a descendant did something or other. I don't know, but I think that him going to children is going to be a little nod to his backstory.
When Ophiakai's shield around Vance falls, the teacher takes advantage of the moment and rams her fist into his crotch. She grabs a sword and Vance's ear, and the teacher drags Vance out of the classroom, again, by the ear. I just love her so much, as Luther happily watches from the sidelines until the teacher has her fill beating the shit out of him. I love this so much for the teacher. I know she doesn't have a name, but I sure do hope that she comes back and DM gets to meet her, because Luther's all like, oh, my DM would love you a lot. When the teacher is done just beating Vance up, Luther takes his blade back right as DM's column of light erupts into the sky, which he knows is meant for him. Wrapping Vance in his shadows, Luther drags Vance back to DM, ready for his queen to dish out revenge.
Like I mentioned earlier, with her letting the rest of the Guardians go, DM is trying to be strategic with these post-battle maneuvers. And with Vance, it's not much different. That man's voice who told her she's got mortal blood on her blade, descended are fighting at her back, it's still ringing in her ear. So if she kills Vance, would it feel good? Probably, definitely. But she'd be killing a wounded hostage mortal. She'd be making Vance into a martyr that the other mortals can then rally behind and run over to Ophiakai's side. It would make that man's earlier statement solidified in stone rather than changeable like she's hoping for it to be. And that doesn't just go for him. That extends to the sudden, steeper uphill battle she would be needing to climb to get the rest of the Guardians onto her side, which is something she wants to do. And then also, there's a small thing of, if she kills Vance, is she better than Ophiakai?
DM would be serving justice to someone who absolutely deserves it in this situation. But that's not really the point in this moment, like Nicole is saying. DM does not want to feed into the hateful cycle that we have talked about already. She wants to break the cycle. She wants to lead by example. And by doing so, if she's going to preach peace and unity with people, she has to do that herself too.
Which makes sense. So instead of killing Vance and finishing the job that Luther and the teacher started very well, DM laces her words with Umbros magic, and she tells him to stop helping Ophiakai, to leave the realm, and to never come back. I will say, if this was a permanent fix in his mind, like a permanent change, this would be a wonderful solution. But it's not. It's only a few days.
Or however long until she's out of sight. You know, this reminds me in the dining room in Umbros, how your cell warned DM that they can make people forget things. And when they make people forget things, that memory never ever comes back. And how it's almost like that's better than dead. What if, I don't see DM doing this because she knows that it would be worse than death, but what if she was to make those permanent changes happen?
It would be a peaceful solution. But then is she playing God by messing with someone's inner thoughts? And again, I'm trying so hard to be totally in her shoes. Like, I have my very own strong opinions about this, but I'm not DM. Like, if she changes someone's mind, is that better than killing them? Like, that's such a violation, right? And I think it's a smart move? Yes, because it would be a peaceful-ish solution for her to not take him off the map, but for her to make someone who was a big problem not a big problem, because he also wouldn't get all the people over to his side because he'd forget about it. I'm with you on this. I tried. That's all from DM's POV. But then we have this whole other POV that is DM letting the Guardians away, even using Umbros magic. It's not helping her side with the Sophos Revenants, because they're like, those people just try to infiltrate our city and kill everyone. Like, what are you doing? Because as they say, if these Guardians are left alive, they can come back and attack better, stronger, more strategic. They know the lay of the land now. They know their weaknesses. This is a lose-lose situation for DM. That's the bottom line.
You know, if she just made them forget about the battle.
I know! I agree! Because to the Sophos residents, again, I'm just going to put another thing in DM's, this is maybe not the smartest thing to do. She's already having to convince them that she's on their side. From the Sophos residents' POV, she's marked by Ophiakai. This and that mark looks pretty sus. Like she could be leaving them alive for a longer term plan, one that she might be working on the other side to see through.
I remember in one of our interviews with Penn, I think it was for our intro episode, that she sees this moment where Diem lets Vance go as a sign of growth for Diem. Diem of book 1 absolutely would have killed him here, but now she is growing and becoming more strategic, thinking beyond this particular moment, and she's weighing the repercussions. And I honestly, as a reader, had not considered that. Us readers, we are out for blood, like Nicole was saying earlier about the FMCs. Like, this is not what we are used to. And this is a calculated move on Diem's part, where she is leading with strategy versus her emotions. Does Vance deserve to die? Absolutely. But not in a way that benefits these rebels. He would become the martyr he is already fully prepared to be.
When it comes to Vance, I do feel like he is being left alive, though, for a very specific reason. At least I need that for me to sleep at night. We know from our Penn Q&A at the Everflame Ball that we're going to learn Vance's backstory in Burn. I don't think I'm going out on a limb here when I say I think we're going to learn the reason he joined the Guardians. So one reason he could be left alive is for us to get that backstory. I honestly wonder if Penn had the backstory written in the scene and she actually decided to nix it and put it in Burn instead for max emotional impact. Now, if we're going back to his family situation and we're going to be learning if him joining the Guardians did have something to do with his family, I also feel like that would be a tick in the Vance killed Andre theory camp, because if he lost his family to the Descended, I could see him wanting to give Diem that same kind of pain. And I'm not going to lie, my mind running with this, what are we going to learn in Vance's backstory, makes me very nervous that I've never felt more nervous that we're going to have sympathy for a character. I feel like we're going to, because that's just Penn Cole's way.
Well, and when we were asking her questions about this backstory, you, Nicole, you were like, are we going to feel sympathy for Vance? And Penn replied with emphasizing whether monsters are made or created, which then led into a really good conversation with our group about how these characters respond to bad things that have happened to them, and that it's not an excuse for their monstrous behavior, but it also humanizes these characters and opens up a bigger philosophical question. I love Penn so much with how she brings out these very insightful themes that apply to everybody, you know?
Other than his backstory and the dreaded sympathy I'm worried to feel for him, I do feel like Vance is being kept alive so that he can go out in a meaningful way in Burn. Whether it's because he's discovered as Andre's killer and Diem finally gets to exact her revenge on him.
Ooh, that's interesting, because I think that Diem will not be the one to kill Vance. It kind of feels like this was her chance and she took the high road and someone else will ultimately finish the job. But if Vance did kill Andre, I think maybe Orly could kill him. That would be another big full circle thing. Though after some of the tidbits that Penn said, I'm wondering again if it was Gareth and the Hanaveras.
I'm down to make a bet if you want to.
I'm not ready to do that yet.
I'm down for it being Vance. I
have a different bet that we might potentially want to come to today.
Oh, interesting. Now, okay, so speaking of other people other than Diem killing Vance, I wonder if it's for Henry to kill Vance and swoop in if he chooses Diem's side in the army, which I definitely think he's going to do now that we know from Penn's Q&A that Henry is going to have a POV chapter in Burn. I see Henry killing the man who poisoned his mind, such a fitting character arc. It's like Henry's finally taking over ownership over his thoughts and beliefs, that he's been a little naive, easily molded, and Penn's words, not mine.
I could see that too. But I wonder if Ophi will somehow kill Vance. And it'll be like Vance was defeated by a mirror of his own hate and violence.
Honestly, I'm fine with any of these outcomes because they all have one common denominator. Yeah.
I think I'm going to go with Ophi.
I'm going to go with Henry.
Shall we just go ahead and make a bet? We have to start making bets at some point. I'm so nervous, but it's like, okay, we're at the second to last episode. Like, it's time to just start making some final decisions here.
I think I am down for bet. So you think that Ophi is going to kill Vance as a literary symbolism of his own hate being reflected back onto him?
Yes, but I want to add a caveat to that where maybe Ophi is not, I'll say, directly, like, where it's not like he slashes him with a sword, but like maybe in like the big power boom sort of thing. Like, that would still count.
Okay, yes. I will accept that.
Okay.
I think it's going to be Henry because it's part of his redemption arc and him finally taking ownership. I'm not putting this as part of the bet, but I do think the motivation for his character will be because he learns that Vance killed Andre and Henry was like, I do not want to be part of this hate anymore. All right, bets it is.
But what's this? There's a Gryvern incoming. Oh, wait, it's Doriel's Gryvern crashing into the street. Don't worry, he's alive. Unfortunately, we cannot say the same about the Faunos Descended who had been with them. From the distance, Ophiuchi on his Gryvern approaches, and while his aura is weaker than before, he still has an immense amount of magic left, like father, like daughter. But I do think that Ophiuchi is, in general, more powerful than Diem. Yes, we believe that she has the Everflame magic within her, which makes her extra unique, but I do think that he overall is more powerful than her. When he lands, Diem raises a shield behind her, protecting the city but leaving herself unguarded, keeping herself between Doriel and Ophiuchi. Diem is having to fight her instincts and the eager thrumming of Sorrow's Edge to not raise her sword. This is happening again. She is here to protect these people, and if he wants to hurt them, Ophiuchi has to go through her first. Okay, so I got another crack theory for you. What if Ophiuchi killed his father, Omnos, and the sword belonged to Omnos, which is why it feels like it belongs to Diem, but it hates Ophiuchi because it wants revenge? I might fun theory myself with this, but I do agree that if the sword belonged to any of the 9 kindred, it would have been Lumnos's. Based on what we know about her expression, statue having a bit of sadness. Again, Sorrow's Edge there. And maybe the sword is the gift, which is why her words have to be remembered. I don't know. Anyway, okay, I'm spiraling again. When Ophiuchi asks about his mortal rebels, he is pissed when Diem refers to his realm as Montios, which makes sense since it's not technically the Forgotten Lands of Montios, but the 10th realm, Omnos, his realm. His magic has a violent, malicious energy to it while he debates what to do with Diem, whether he lets her live or die. Suddenly, and this part is very interesting, Diem understands the cold, empty numbness she's been fighting since Fortos, and she gives into it and lets the humanity wash away from her. And she notes that in Ophiuchi's presence, this feeling, this cold inhumanity that she has, is as natural as breathing and as inevitable as death. And this is when Diem realizes that this feeling, this cold numbness, it comes from him. And I believe what this means is that back in Fortos, when she killed the king and especially his high general, Diem didn't feel remorse, which is what scared her more than anything. This innate lack of compassion, this feeling of power where you can kill simply because you know that you can. And this brings us back to the theme of, are monsters born or are they made? I think there is a part of her that is this monster, and her compassion will have to balance with it, where she finds this medium of being capable of doing what needs to be done, but not losing her humanity in it. She, again, is this balance. After giving into this feeling, Diem no longer cares what happens. If Ophiuchi kills her, oh well, she doesn't fear him or death. She's just a hollow abyss. It's not until Diem sees and feels Luther place a shield around her that she snaps out of this emotionless black pit, reminding her of who she is and who she lives for. Luther. Oh, he's like internally like, no, you cannot kill my queen. Which, did Ophiuchi do something to put Diem in, for lack of a better word, a trance? Or was it her giving into this familiar power and energy she feels stemming from him? I think it's the former.
Interesting. I think it's the latter.
Oh, it's not Umbros magic because she would have felt that and she could have absorbed it like we've seen her do that in the past. So, yeah. But Ophiuchi picks up on this connection here with Luther that he's helping her with, turning his attention away from Diem and onto Luther. Believing that her magic has no effect on Ophiuchi, Diem pleads with him to let Luther live and not harm him. To which Ophiuchi tells Diem, quote, I can be generous, daughter. I can be forgiving, but I will not be disobeyed. You have struck at me twice. Do it a third time, and my protection will end. He curls his fingers, causing the mark on Diem's neck to flare with pain and intense heat in warning of what he could so easily do to her. And with that, he climbs onto his Gryvern and leaves the city.
So, raise your hand if you're concerned how when Ophiuchi is threatening Diem's life, he realizes that Luther is really important to Diem, because I'm raising my hand. With this one cutting of his eyes from Diem to Luther, Ophiuchi realizes that Luther is in his eyes, a weakness for Diem that he can exploit. If he turns his power onto Luther, he will be able to bend Diem to his will. Full stop. Yeah. I am terrified that he is going to do this in Burn. And it's again, that it goes back to what Yrcel said to Diem. Are you willing to watch everyone you love die? And Diem said everything. And I don't think Ophiuchi is going to kill Luther, because I would riot. But I do think that's going to be a major dramatic point in the book, Maybe not a long dramatic point, but a very impactful one.
So Ophi threatened to remove his protection. So like the mark that DM has here that is keeping her protected during these battles with his rebels. I wonder if he will end up removing this protection symbol. I wonder also if it magically disappears on Kirill, or she's able to use her own magic to remove it on herself. Because she does do that with somebody else. As she's healing them, the mark disappears.
So
right?
I have this in foreshadowing. That was one thing that I think is going to happen is she's going to heal the mark away on her own self. And she's going to start healing it away on guardians who move to her side towards the end of the battle.
I like that. I like that a lot. Or what if Ophi like plants some of his guardians to go in there and then she heals it and then he won't be able to track them in the same way?
Oh, possibly.
Or maybe this 10-pointed mark on her, it'll play a bigger role than we think. And there's a bigger reason that Ophi is marking so many people, including the dead. I could see by the end of all of this, DM lives and it's faded to just a scar. And that would be its own nice little full circle moment where it's a scar from this fight for humanity that they will always remember what they sacrificed.
And just given how important scars are in this world. Yeah,
exactly.
I totally see that for DM and Luther. With the battle over, we know that DM has to give the sword back to Doriel to put back into the archives, but she doesn't wanna. We know, or at least can strongly assume, based on what we know from Penn, that we are going to see this sword again.
I mean, it's in the visions.
It's in the visions.
Yes.
It's got a name. If we've learned anything about things that have a name, it's going to come back. It's definitely coming back. I will say that with full certainty. But how? How is DM going to get it back? My favorite option for getting it back is obviously an archives heist. I love an archives heist. If you've been with FFG for a while, you know we love an archives heist here on the pod. The only reason I'm hesitant to fully jump onto this train is simply because of page time and how much page time it might take. And we already have so many other loose ends to tie up. So another option is making, I'll say just another deal with Doriel to get it back. Although considering how the last deal went, or is going to go next episode.
Ooh, I do think that they will have to make some kind of deal, and it'll have to be both of them trusting each other with it. Or maybe DM could prove herself worthy of wielding a Kindred's weapon, and Doriel has to recognize that it is her destiny. Doriel is very logical, and so I could see DM proving herself in some kind of way that it is logical for her to have this here. But you're right, they do have quite the uphill battle to climb together.
Well, so I'll throw out another option. What if DM becomes the Queen of Sophos, like Doriel gets taken out by Ophi, and because of that, DM then gets to go into the archives because they're technically her archives, and she gets to get the sword. This is the one I'm leaning towards the most.
Okay, so I have a hill that I am willing to die on with this.
Oh, okay.
I am convinced that Stuart is going to go get it for his queen, and because he's so smitten with her, right? And he will take the risk. He has access to these archives with the sword, and he will do an off-page heist and ensure it gets back in DM's hands.
So you think Stuart is going to go behind Doriel's back to get it? Because here's the deal. If DM is the Queen of Sophos and Stuart goes to get the sword, then I'm still technically right. I would count myself as still technically right.
Might as well. Stuart gets the sword for her. He knows how important it is for DM here. And he is going to make it his responsibility to get the sword back for this queen.
Regardless of if she's queen or not.
Yeah.
Then I will not make that bet with you, because if she is queen and Stuart goes to get the sword, then I still consider myself right. You know what? Never mind. I will make that bet with you. I changed my mind. I will make that bet because we do need to start making bets for this new book, and I'm medium certain that that's
okay. I will compromise with you here.
Okay, compromise.
If DM tells someone, specifically Stuart, to go get the sword, then that counts.
Okay.
If Stuart
gets it on his
own, if Stuart if he's not taking orders from his Queen of Sophos, then I win.
Okay, I can get behind that.
Okay.
All right. We've got 2 more bets.
I don't think I'm done yet either.
Oh my God.
Now that the battle is over, Good news, the casualties were few. Though RIP to all of those who fell, their courage to defend their beloved city will inspire others and they will never be forgotten. Mortals and Descended fought side by side, helping one another as they together defended their city. I really think this will set an example for the future of this world. Throughout Heat, we've gotten to experience other realms, and I love how there are parts of each, or at least most, that have good qualities that can hopefully help shape the future. And we've seen really good things between Mortals and Descended, like for instance the escaped prisoners from Fortos and such. Doriel decides it's time to complete Diem's coronation and plans to summon the other crowns to Kareel. With Ophiuchi coming after all the Descended, the crowns need to act now to prevent the foraging magic from breaking down any further. Doriel will send messenger hawks this evening to all the crowns with the goal of meeting on the island in 2 days. Doriel wants to be clear that they cannot promise the crowns will agree to the pardons Diem seeks and cannot promise a vote of 6, which is the majority, in favor of her and her mother's freedom. But Doriel will vote in Diem's favor and try to persuade Miros as well, and at least just give Diem the opportunity to present her case. Though this does mean that Diem has to uphold her end of the deal, so she needs to convince Orally to convince the Guardians to allow the crowns onto the island, which I don't think her mother actually agreed to that. Diem here, when Doriel's like, yeah, you can make that happen, right? She lies. And it's like, yes, I can definitely do that. And in her mind, she's like, I have no idea if I can do this here. So Diem is not entirely sure she can make this happen, but she also cannot let Doriel know her hesitation. So of course, she agrees to ensuring that the Guardians will allow the crowns on the island that they are still holding hostage so that she can complete her coronation.
So this is what they're saying to Diem. And I don't think they have this concrete plan right now, but over the next 2 days, here's what they're going to be cooking up. Because right now she has 3 crowns, with Sophos and Miros voting on her side for both a pardon for her and her mother. That's 5 crowns voting in her favor. They're still missing 1. The odds of another crown agreeing to not only Diem's pardoning, but Aralie's pardoning is highly unlikely in Doriel's mind. So if Doriel gets Diem into a bonded bargain where she will lose her magic, it's kind of a win-win for everyone, again, in their eyes, because despite her just helping Sophos, Doriel does not fully trust Diem. She won a lot of points back with this, but not fully. They saw firsthand just how powerful she is. She has magic of all the realms. That has never happened before. But they didn't just see how powerful she is. They saw how powerful her sire is. A sire who wants to work with Diem. And Doriel's not exactly certain she's not working with Ophiuchi. She does bear his mark after all. If Diem and Ophiuchi are banded together or eventually band together, there is no hope for Amarian. So, if Doriel gets her off the board with no magic, they see it as a strategic move for the better of Amarian.
Sure seems like history is repeating itself with the crowns luring Diem to the island to imprison her during times of war.
And how ironic coming from someone who is priding themselves on always wanting to learn from history. We will be talking about this and Doriel's POV a lot more in the next episode, our last episode of Everflame until we get to Burn. Wow. But this is important to note here that they do need a few days of research, quote unquote, to concoct this plan in order to make sure they have the upper hand. But Diem doesn't know that. With Diem willing to put her life on the line to kill Ophiuchi, it only seems fair that Diem hears all the information from Doriel on the Lost Realm. While it is highly confidential by orders of Father Sophos himself, Doriel and we are going to tell you anyway. To start, this is information that not even the crowns know. That's how big of a deal this is. All of the records were destroyed, with the only remaining knowledge being what's been passed down from the Sophos crown to Sophos crown, and a few additional details that are left in Doriel's research. There's the Lost Realm, which belonged to the 10th kindred, Omnos.
When Doriel says they found some details in their own research, I'm guessing that when Montios requested Sophos to research the 10-pointed star that we learned about last episode, Doriel quickly knew what that symbolized and explored a little more, like looking at the original map of Amarian that they reference or something along those lines. But the way that just hearing that there is a 10th kindred, Diem instantly knows there is a grave danger in merely knowing this truth. And again, here I am thinking about in the Fortos cell with the Godstone and how she was like, there's this ancient truth that I don't know yet. Could this be it?
I don't think it's it. I think it's part of it, though.
Okay,
for
yeah.
sure. Omnos was the youngest sibling of the kindred, and during the original forging, had a crown and a realm all of his own. It was between Sophos and Montios, which is now known as the Forgotten Lands. We talked about this last episode. But the first story that Doriel tells Diem is that Omnos died, debatable, a few years after the forging, and since it was believed he had no one to inherit the crown, the remaining 9 kindred redid the spell and his lands were given to Montios. During the reforging, the 10th portal in the kindred temple was torn down and all the maps of the continent were redrawn, along with anything that referenced him being burned or rewritten.
Ah, like the pages from Montios' journal that got ripped out, which Penn confirmed these pages have been destroyed, but we will be able to deduce what they say with more information we get in Burn.
There was even attempts to kill his Gryvern, Sepphoris, but it escaped and went into hiding. Where? Great question. We're wondering that too.
I did ask Penn, but she wouldn't tell me. Apparently she answers your questions and not mine.
That's because I get her before she has coffee in the morning.
Then I followed up asking if the Gryvern went back to the homeworld, but she said the Kindred's homeworld has been destroyed, so that's not possible.
The 10th Realm's sigil is also the same 10-pointed star that Ophiuchi uses currently. How interesting. Doriel believes that this means Ophiuchi is a relative of this mysterious 10th kindred. Or insert my own willing to die on the hill. He is the 10th kindred.
Okay, so that's the first version Doriel tells. But with Diem's Umbros magic tingling, she can sense that that's not all there is to the story. Doriel is trying to tell Diem as little as possible, but cannot escape the lie detector test.
There's no direct statements about how Omnos died, but there are references from the kindred talking about a great personal sacrifice to protect the mortals after the forging. The rest of the details have been lost to history. We'll see about that in Burn, but there is speculation by some of the Sophos crowns that the sacrifice made was Omnos himself. It's speculated that this happened because he was the only kindred who did not take a mate and thus never gave up his immortality like the rest of them. But we also know from Montios' diary that she and the rest of their kindred siblings kind of feared him. He was not shaken by the war that happened in their homeland when he damn well should have. So whatever great sacrifice they had to do to, air quotes, get rid of him, I don't think it took a whole lot of convincing on their part.
I wonder if Lumnos was the most against it, but still knew it had to be done.
Possibly.
So here's the timeline that I am working with. The 9 kindred, not Omnos, found mortal mates and wanted to make their lovers immortal like them. Instead, the kindred's lives became bound to their mortals, making their lifespan very short comparatively. Then they decided to do the forging spell, and this was the plan that the 9 kindred had to convince their youngest brother, Omnos, of. Or, here's another version that I'm running with. The original forging spell included all 10 kindred, and it was supposed to make their immortal lovers immortal. But it didn't work. Maybe because Omnos did not have a mortal lover, so the whole spell backfired on the 9 kindred. And yes.
So then the great personal sacrifice was their immortal lives with their mates. So their great personal sacrifice was them not spending their whole lives together. It was them slashing their time with their love short.
Instead of the great personal sacrifice being Omnos?
Yes.
Oh. Okay, so hold up. Let me keep going here.
Okay, keep going.
So then this plan that is referenced in Montios' diary, the plan is not the foraging spell, but it is something else, something different, because they've already done the foraging spell and it didn't properly work or something like that. And Omnos never ended up agreeing to it, and that's why they moved forward with the sacrifice for him. The kindred believed that Omnos was a threat to the mortals, but I think they were worried about his unchecked power after they left and his intentions to rule over all. Yeah, if the kindred were dead, what was to stop their immortal and very powerful brother from damaging everything they had worked toward and built in this new world of mortals and descended? Anyway, when they sacrificed Omnos, they recast the foraging magic to make it only 9 realms. But because either they didn't actually kill Omnos or he had a son, Ophiuchi, the 10th realm always stayed on the outskirts. And now that there is a 10th realm and crown in the mix that the foraging magic isn't supposed to account for, the spell across the world is unraveling. And to rectify it, they need the usual 9 kindred. But as we've learned, that still doesn't fully erase this 10th kindred from the land and its magic with the Forgotten Lands, or the fact that there is a 10th crown and Gryvern. Let's go with the narration that we have in the book right now and assume that Ophiuchi is Omnos' child. That makes me wonder, who would Omnos have had a child with? Because if he was part of the original foraging, he had a realm and a crown, and I'm assuming keeping the smoky gray as his color. So if they did sacrifice him after this, he would have had to have offspring, which would have had to have been with a mortal, because again, the timeline, there would not have been early descended. So here I am wondering if Ophiuchi does have a mortal and a kindred parent, or if Diem is the first of the 10th kindred to be that essentially the first descended from a kindred and a mortal. I want to talk about this concept of stealing magic real quick, because we haven't seen much of it from Diem in a proactive way, usually just when she absorbs, except at the second chance in when she absorbed Zeleric's shield and then traced the magic back to him. And then Ophiuchi in the stretch, he seems to have her magic like leaving her at one point, like she can feel him trying to take it. So while yes, it's true that Diem did not steal the crowns she received or the types of magic, I think it's safe to say the kindred really did agree to make her their salvation to right the wrong and such. She can steal magic, and I'll be very curious to see how that plays out in Burn.
Looking at that from all sides, I am so married to the fact that Omnos is Ophiuchi, because Omnos, he never tied himself to a mate that we know of, so he would have been able to live forever. What's stopping him from being like, my name's Ophiuchi now, bitches? Like, I'm going by that. But going back to Doriel's download, all he has is a single map of the island and a hidden door with a note that says, don't ever open this, it's a bad idea, and it's dated back since the Blood War.
Doriel speculates that the crowns must have discovered Ophiuchi somehow, and they worried he was too powerful, so they lured him to the island where he had no magic, and they trapped him there in hopes Omnos' line would die out. First of all, the crowns from 1 generation ago knew about the offspring of Omnos. Like, Doriel is so surprised that your cell says the name Omnos when they're at the ceremony here shortly, and it's like, yeah, like, Ophiuchi, like, come on.
Yes.
But that actually, no, that means that it would have been, or at least to your cell, which of course she's kind of in her own category here, that it was known at least to some degree. I don't know. Anyway.
Well, we don't know, because Ophiuchi might have come back in the Blood War very briefly, and the crowns caught him early and locked him up. We don't know how much of a knowledgeable impact he had on the Blood War, if any.
True. I also wonder if Montios knew about Omnos, because I'm kind of guessing no.
Oh, I think they did. Oh, I totally think the crown of
really,
Montios
because
knew.
in the letter, the late king was like, I don't know what this means, but apparently this is essential for you to have. And so I don't think that he knew Ophiuchi was tied to Omnos in the same way that your cell obviously does.
I agree with you on that front. I don't think he knew to the same degree, but I think that if he locked up Ophiuchi, he would have had to know something about, because he had magic that they'd never been able to see. Well, we don't know how he used that magic. I don't know. I feel so in the dark. But why not just ask those 2 crowns, Doriel? Well, the 2 that were alive, Montios and Umbros, they refused to talk about it. I mean, to be fair, the crown of Montios just refuses to talk to anyone outside of Montios, so I'll give him that. But your cell's like, fuck no, am I talking to you about it?
I have so many questions.
I know.
And luckily, Pin confirmed during our Q&A that we will learn Ophiuchi's backstory and the details of why he was locked up. Okay, Nicole, here's a big part that I've been waiting for. When Diem first hears the name Omnos, quote, the name struck a bolt of lightning straight into my godhood. So first of all, there's another reference of lightning again, like how you were mentioning earlier about how it might have a deeper meaning. But yeah, Diem's godhood has quite the reaction to hearing Omnos' name. It's familiar with the name, and it's both trembling with fear and kneeling in reverence. It's filling her body with eager power and shrinking with dread. This might be balance per se, but I think this is another example of Diem embodying opposites, fight and healing, anger and compassion. It's the 2 sides of her. What she gets from Ophiuchi with her godhood, and maybe something else like from the Everflame. I want to point out something about Diem's godhood's reaction to hearing the name Omnos, because I think it might be a hole in our theory that Ophiuchi is Omnos, even though everything else points in that direction. Let's continue our assumption that Ophiuchi is Omnos' real name from his homeworld, which would make it seem like Diem's godhood would recognize the name Ophiuchi too. After all, that could be the name her godhood is technically most familiar with, being part of the original kindred world. But when her mother last episode shared Ophiuchi's name for the first time, Diem's reaction was entirely emotional as a daughter learning her father's name, with this instance, hearing Omnos, her godhood goes crazy with a reaction. And Diem can't help but wonder what would happen if she gives into her instinct to succumb to embracing this hold the name of Omnos has on her and her godhood. I'll go to say, too, if we're talking about, just names, when Ophiuchi is in her presence, she does feel that sense of wanting to succumb to, I'll call it the darkness, the inhumanity. And in this case, there is a balance, and I'm just really confused that she gets such a huge reaction with just the name Omnos when we've been theorizing and speculating that Omnos was literally just right here, and her godhood didn't have that same kind of reaction.
You want to make a bet? I'll make a bet. You make some really great points here. I cannot see a world where Ophiuchi and Omnos are not the same person.
Because, I really do think that, but then, I've been thinking this a whole deep dive, and then I read this, and I was like, wait a second, that is such a different reaction. And if we've learned anything, it is that their godhoods have a mind of their own. So if they are the same person, I don't think now that Ophiuchi is Omnos' homeworld name. And it would have to be a name made up that Diem's godhood would not recognize the same way as Omnos. But even if he did just make up the name Ophiuchi, his presence with her, her godhood, all of that, just, there's such a contradictory, which is why I said earlier, maybe Ophiuchi killed his father Omnos. I don't know.
Are you sure you don't want to make a bet?
I'm not ready yet.
Okay.
I'm not ready. No matter what, we get so much emphasis on bloodlines in this stretch because there are only two descended, I say with heavy air quotes that they're descended, from Omnos. They are extra powerful. This goes back to the idea of not diluting descended bloodlines. Your cell only keeps 100 Umbros centenaries to keep their power contained and strong. And then somehow I feel like the half-mortal children fit into this with being stronger, but I just don't quite know yet. And we get this line of Diem trembling at the possibility that there are others like her hiding in the shadows. I don't think that's foreshadowing because that would be really weird if there's more like her and OP level kind of power. But I just had to point that out.
Maybe? It would feel a little Deus Ex Machina to me, but unless it would entirely depend on how it's done. And honestly, I trust Pen to do that very tastefully, just like I trust her to kill off Diem very tastefully. Anyway, back to my morning chats with Pen, because again, I had no shame, and I asked her every single question I could, including questions about Stuart, because why not? Since this is the last time we see him, and she gave me a quote. Generally, if I give them a name, they're gonna come back. We've talked about this a few times, which, by the way, I am so glad we went so meticulously through the Four Toes episode with all the named individuals, even though I'm pretty sure that runtime almost did our executive producer in. Anyway, what does this mean for Stuart? This is the last time we will see him on the page. For all we know, he's running around Sophos, and I don't really feel like he has any intention in leaving soon between the end of this book and the start of Burn. His mother has a 10-year contract of research, and it's over next year, so we can strongly assume he's not going to leave. So my guess is that we're not going to see him until Diem comes back for the sword in some way. There is a moment when he says to Diem, quote, "You could be my queen." He's talking about the possibility of him going to Lumnos after the contract is done, but I'm thinking that this is a bit of foreshadowing for her becoming the queen of Sophos. And for Stuart saying, "You could be my queen," and she being the queen of Sophos, and then she gets the sword and I win the bet.
With some of the injured having Godstone wounds, you know what time it is. Poultice time, and attempts to heal these Godstone wounds.
Poultice time is not a word I ever thought would be said on this podcast. With Diem having cured 3 Godstone wounds before, 2 from Tara and 1 from Luther, she's like, "Allow me, I can help." But the poultice she made is kind of been there, done that, according to the healer. While Diem's made the poultice a few times, it really only worked the first time. So something's not adding up. She's made this poultice multiple times, even using the same water from the Igneo spring, but it didn't work any of those times, again, except for the first. So tapping into her Sophos photographic memory magic, God, I love this, Diem recalls the memory from the first time she made the poultice, watching herself prepare the herbs, smashing them into a paste, cutting the linen, and accidentally cutting her hand, seeing the blood on her knife, and watching the blood drip into the poultice. The only thing that wasn't in all of her other poultice attempts. By George, she's got it! Finally!
Now, this is another moment where we, the readers, may have already picked this up. And obviously, we've been talking about it at length in this deep dive. But this right here is the moment that it truly dawns on Diem as a possibility. She felt like there was something to all of this back when she healed Luther. Her gut told her that the Arboros potion wasn't actually the cure. Yet here, with her Sophos magic, it clicks. And Diem purposefully does not let the healers in on this bit of information. They think she's just mixing the same poultice that they've tried plenty of times before. First of all, Diem wants to confirm for herself that her blood is the solution. She's still not sure because it is just that disbelievable. And second, this is a big fucking deal if her blood can uniquely cure Godstone. And if Diem has learned anything, it is that keeping some info to your chest is important, especially since she doesn't know for certain yet herself.
Thinking that Diem isn't doing anything they haven't already attempted, the healers brush off Diem's insistence because they haven't had anything that can cure Godstone since the Kindred were alive. And this queen coming in saying she can do it is kind of like, okay, dear, sure. Now pause, because this since the Kindred were alive does not exactly mean that the Kindred had the same blood power to cure Godstone, because it could also mean that they were the ones who brought Godstone into this world and they didn't have this problem before the Kindred were alive. So I don't really know.
I'm like 99.9% positive it is a Kindred thing because I'm assuming Ophiuchi has the same ability.
Yeah.
Godstone has proved not to be fatal to him. He survived a Godstone wound to the heart.
Yeah, I think you're right. But thank goodness for watchful pressure this healer has, with Diem literally watching over her shoulder, waiting for her to put the poultice on the Godstone wounded patients. We will learn next episode on the island that Doriel is thrilled that they have a cure for Godstone. Finally, believing it's something the healers created, though, not Diem herself. So they're like, lock up the girl who they have no idea cured everybody. That sounds like a good idea.
Yep, when Igneos will be freaking out about his Godstone wound yourself sneakily inflicted, Doriel will be like, calm down, our researchers just figured out the cure, you'll be fine. And while Diem will be inwardly glad that her blood indeed does work, she will not share this information with Doriel or the other crowns. So I bet as Sophos tries to repeat this cure, they will not be able to. They'll realize it was something Diem did. And will you look at that? Now they need Diem for something else no one can do. In this magic field segment of the episode, let's tap into our Umbros magic and turn our full attention to important foreshadowing moments for the rest of this book. Well, however many chapters are left here, as well as, of course, speculations for Book 4, Burn of the Everflame.
We've absolutely talked about this before, but as Diem gets her new photographic memory power, we see this coming into play in a wildly useful way in Burn. Like, tiny things that Diem did throughout this series will have huge payoffs down the line. Like, the key to Earcel's library being in the back of Diem's wardrobe in Lumnos. I hope she did not forget that. Also, when she commits Luther's laughter to memory while they're walking through the streets of Sophos, the romantic in me sees her flittering back to that memory regularly while she's on the island of Kareel, because somehow she has access to that magic in Kareel. Don't make it logical. Just let me have this.
Oh, shoot, she can't read all of her books in her mind either.
I know, I just thought of that.
Oh, man.
Damn it.
That would suck so much, because that's like you have all the books on your Kindle and you forgot it.
It's like you're stranded on a desert island and you have Kindle Unlimited, but your Kindle's dead.
Yes,
that's what it's
exactly
like.
what this is. Diem mentions how when they get back to Lumnos, she'd love to show Luther around Mortal City. Well, sadly, that won't happen in this book, but we really hope that'll happen in Burn so Diem can have these moments with Luther, and more specifically, he can have that moment with his mortal heritage.
Vance brings up how, now that he knows Orally fucked Ophiuchi, his words, not mine, that can put an end to their problems recruiting the rest of the Guardians to Ophiuchi's side. Diem, I love you. This was maybe a bit of information you should have kept close to your chest, because bad, this is bad. First off, it's not surprising that he would exploit this info for his own gain. But secondly, I am deeply worried about how many people Vance will now be able to bring to Ophiuchi's side, because they already feel like their loyalty to Orly's Guardians faction is hanging on by a thread in the early chapters of Burn, especially now that we know the cell is already shaky with Orly so focused on getting Diem free rather than the Guardian's mission. Now, it is time to enter the Sophos Library, where each episode, Lexi guides us through a world-building topic to help us deepen our understanding of this world and its magic.
Today's Sophos Library topic is Sophos! Hooray! I'm so excited. All right, so as always, let's start with the overview. Sophos is the realm of thought and spark, and its descendant's eye color is pink. And the two types of Sophos magic are the power of spark, which is a buzzing, electrifying current that gives power to many of their cutting-edge innovations. And the second type is the power of thought, an ability to memorize everything they've ever seen, heard, or read, turning their head into a trove from which they can recall even the tiniest of detail with ease. And Sophos' sigil is an open book illuminated by a glowing spark. Hey, that's kind of like our logo. Sophos is known for their obsession with knowledge and their cutting-edge innovations, but their innovations are not allowed to leave Sophos unless it's a coronation gift, as Luther sadly learned when he tried so hard to get a shower in Lumnos. I would have tried that too, buddy. Some of the examples of these coronation gifts are the microphone used in the Lumnos arena, the boats that the crowns all used to get to the island, the horseless carriage that the Sophos representatives arrived to the Ascension Ball in, and the one that we're most familiar with, the Orb of Answering. Sophos' geography is rolling grasslands with futuristic cities. We know that at least Sophos City has towering buildings of metal and glass and mind-bending designs that defy the laws of gravity. They have paved streets bustling with machines that zip around carrying people. In other words, the Amarian version of a car. Sophos also contains Amarian's largest libraries and a number of prestigious invitation-only research institutions. The Library of Sophos contains every book that has ever been written in Amarian, except for a few that are in the Umbros Library too. Can't forget about that. Even when the crowns decreed that all books on the mortal religions and histories were to be destroyed, a handful of copies were set aside for the archives here at the Sophos Library. There are stacks of books, endless shelves packed to the brim with rare tomes. The Sophos Library has a beautiful hand-painted ceiling that was built by the ancient mortals. Then there are the old mortal temples like the one that we saw here at the beginning of this episode. This temple was originally given to the descendant of Sophos for safekeeping. There was a time when the continent was full of magnificent buildings just like this temple, but the wars between the mortals before the Kindred's arrival caused many casualties, including buildings, art, maps, books, etc. The mortal ruler of these lands offered their remaining treasures to Father Sophos in hopes that he would protect them from meeting the same fate. And Sophos has copious records on both these mortal creations, as well as them formally giving it over to the Kindred and the Descended. It was the fourth Sophos crown that ordered the destruction of the temple, and Doriel, the current crown, agrees that this was a poor decision. Yeah, we'll say that again. According to Doriel, any mortal can request a visit to these old temples, and every worthy request is granted. But like we said earlier, in order to be deemed worthy, the person must have documented history of study and interest, trustworthy references, and no criminal activity. Sophos also has magnificent greenhouses with glass-paneled domes filled with impressive varieties of plants. Here, researchers are trying to breed hardier versions of rare medicinal plants to grow in other soils and climates that are not just arboros, so that more people can access them across all of Amarian. Sophos does have mental institutions for anyone mentally unstable or supposedly mentally unstable, like Luther's mother. Just like any city, Sophos City also has a seedy underbelly that its leaders refuse to acknowledge. In these dark alleys, sex and drugs are on sale around the clock. And for a mortal where losing their place here in Sophos could mean losing everything, so many of them turn to mind-enhancing substances to keep up with their descended colleagues, and sadly, some of them do end up addicted and they ruin their lives in the process of trying to compete in this very intellectually competitive place. Speaking of the mortals are permitted in Sophos by invitation only. Mortals can earn a spot at one of Sophos' universities or as a researcher, but it is very difficult to get this invitation. If a mortal is even caught breathing too close to someone who is suspected of being a rebel, they are banned from Sophos for life. Remember that Teller is an exception. Mortals here get paid so much that most of them send money back home to their families. Thieves realized this and started targeting anyone with relatives in Sophos, so people began faking their deaths, and their loved ones would still know that they're safe, but everyone else from their home realm would think that they're dead. This is how they protect their loved ones. But there's also a twist, and part of this is rumor and part of it is true. When a mortal outlives their usefulness in conducting research, they become the research themselves. According to Henry and the Guardians, the Descended experiment on them and put them in cages to run tests, sometimes with medicine and sometimes with magic or weapons. And while there is a little truth to this rumor that there are experiments that are done to mortals, But the key is that these mortals volunteer. They want to do something useful with their lives, and they get paid a fortune when they volunteer to do this that they can then leave behind for their families. Volunteering for the greater good is seen as a very noble choice, and the results of these experiments can save thousands of lives, and the money the mortals make can keep their families out of poverty for generations. Overall, the mortals in Sophos are very happy. They are treated well, and they are proud of the work that they do. And here, mortals and descended commingle, and most residential buildings are communal with a diverse mix of people. Citizens are expected to embrace a love of curiosity, not just in their research, but also in their private lives as well. To encourage this, each quarter within the city holds nightly events featuring music, theater, and food so that neighbors can commingle and learn something new. But while they embrace this communal aspect, the descended are still freely able to come and go as they please, and the city is closed to mortals except by invitation, like we said earlier. And I will say that in Sophos, classrooms are segregated to prevent mortal children from learning things the crowns deem too dangerous for them to know. Even in Sophos, classrooms are segregated. However, as we learned, for the extra young descended children, the toddlers, they did have a mortal teacher there who is a badass. May I say that again? Most residents dress smartly with cleanly tailored suits and elegant fabrics, and some even have ballooning sleeves and oversized jewels and overcoats that trail like billowing capes. Again, I'm getting Hunger Games capital vibes here. The residents of Sophos are always rushing to get from place to place, and they don't like when people are just, casually strolling through the streets because it makes it more difficult to get where they are going. I've never been to New York, but this hurry culture sounds exactly like that. Just like the rest of the realms, Sophos has guards, but they are not as war ready as the rest of the realm's guards. The people of Sophos are first and foremost academics, and the worst crimes the guards deal with are stolen books. They are not prepared for war, and most of them don't even have weapons. Now let's move on to the Sophos crown named Doriel, who insists on being called by their name and not their title, claiming the only things titles do is encourage an inflated ego. You hear that, Luther? Doriel is non-binary and described as beautiful beyond words. Their crown is a ring of crackling sparks that splinter out like lightning. They also have a very powerful aura as well. The Sophos crown is also in charge of the rituals on Corel and responsible for guiding the rest of the crowns through them and making sure everything goes according to the rules and traditions. Lastly, we have Sophos' Gryvern, Vexus, who is a male and alive. Still after this battle, thank goodness. Vexus is plump and petite and accustomed to a life of spoiled leisure. And that, friends, is what we know about Sophos.
Let us close out the second to last episode of Heat of the Everflame with skipping around the apple orchard and discussing our favorite moments from this stretch of chapters. First up, our goat family is growing. Luther admits that their goat is now named Taryn Jr. And when I asked Penn if we're going to see this goat family, she lovingly reminded me that Diem is dead. Thanks, Penn.
I followed up with, okay, but what's the real answer? Or something to that effect.
She goes, Diem is dead.
I just love how it's and a donkey named Aemon. I just love that little bit there too.
Well, because it's he's an ass. I think that's so funny. And yes, it took me until this read to get that.
So how Diem describes the mortal having a culture of their own. Quote, we found pockets of beauty and humor in our suffering. And when we couldn't find them, we created them as both an act of defiance and an act of survival. We talked a lot in Glow about the cultural differences between mortals and descended, including when it comes to family and how the mortals look out for one another and bond in a familial way that the descended just can't understand. And I just love how Penn writes this. It is so beautiful with how she captures this culture that they have created all on their own. I love how Diem channels her father, the commander, as she gives a speech to these Sophos guards before they go into battle. All I can think about is Tyrion Lannister from the Blackwater Bay battle. That's all I can picture.
Oh, it's so good.
But seriously, I believe this is just a glimpse of how we will see Diem command and lead and burn, especially for the final battle scene.
Absolutely. Speaking of that, this is so small, but when Diem is running off to face Ophi, Teller salutes to his sister who runs off to battle. Andre is somewhere just so proud of his kids. And side note, do you think that Ophi and Teller are ever going to face off with each other? I don't really see it as one of not reunion, but I don't see it as a face off that I'm putting super high.
If anything, I could see Ophi trying to recruit Teller, but because Teller is also Orly's son, I could see him being I don't want nothing to do with you.
Definitely.
Or it would be a way to hurt Orly.
That's what I'm nervous about, is something like that. Or he sees Orly and Teller together and she sacrifices herself for her kids. Ooh.
Well, on that note, thank you so much for listening to this episode 7 of our Heat of the Everflame deep dive.
Next Monday, September 22nd, is our last episode of Heat of the Everflame, where we are covering chapters 71 to 75. We made it, friends. I have in here in the outline, aka the end of the book, aka the sex scene. Finally! God!
I probably wrote that into the book part.
You did. I would have written something very different.
It's the end of an era. It's always so bittersweet when we finish a series, even if it's just for now, you know? On October 6th, we are starting our next series deep dive, which is Quicksilver by Callie Hart. Yes, all of these episodes will include spoilers for the whole book. We'll deep dive Quicksilver in the lead up to the sequel, Brimstone, and then cover that through the end of the year. We'd love to give the biggest warm welcome to our newest Crowns Council members.
Thank you so much for joining Natasha M., Paige M., Isabel, Mackenzie P., Brandy, Angela, and Josephine E. Welcome. We're so happy you're here. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts for supporting the show.
Yes, thank you so much. We appreciate you. And if you're like, hey, I want my name shouted on the podcast and be shouted with all the love too, join our fan club at fantasyfangirls.com/fan club. The link is also in the show notes.
Thank you, as always, to our top Sophos scholar, aka our content researcher, Brooke, and of course, our executive producer, aka our sanity manager, Hayden. We love you both.
We are very active on social media with weekly trivia and lots more. So please be sure to follow us on Instagram and / our TikTok at Fantasy Fangirls Pod. And if you're watching this on YouTube or want to watch on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button to keep following along.
While you're hitting buttons, don't forget to rate and review the podcast. Not just this podcast, though. Any and all podcasts you listen to. It is one of the best things that you can do to give a hug to your favorite podcasters. And if you want to go above and beyond, write a little love note in that review section. It is so helpful. And last, but most certainly not least, share this episode with your fellow Everflame friends. If you were watching the Instagram stories a few weeks ago and you were like, oh, I wish I was at the Everflame ball. I wonder what they learned during the Q&A. This is a great episode to send to your friends so you can spiral just like Lexi and I did until 2 in the morning.
In my Heat book that Penn signed, she literally wrote at the very bottom, P.S. Sorry for making you spiral.
Same.
Smiley face.
I'm like, I don't think you're sorry.
All right, friends. Thank you so much as always. We appreciate you. We will see you next week for our final Heat of the Everflame episode. Bye. I have never been so upset that I slept in. I am a mom. I don't sleep very much. I had the opportunity to sleep in a little bit, and I missed all of this. But yeah.
Not to be terrible, you were packing. You weren't even sleeping.
Oh, shut up.